Yes, there's a general fund budget and also a fire services budget. Other funds.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, in the memo that I sent out to the board over the weekend, we explained the situation going on with the budgets. The general fund budget was facing a deficit of $790,860. We approached the big deficit two ways. One, there is a list of cuts that we made to the budget. They are listed on your attachment number 2. Mostly they follow the memo that I sent out earlier a couple weeks ago that listed all the potential cuts and the dollar amounts of them in the description. The second leg of this approach was to identify our one-time payments. They were listed on attachment number 1. And you can see between the capital items and a list of other items which are not necessarily capital. They could be studies, consultant fees, but in any case, they're one-time payments. They're not recurring costs. We came up with a total of $615,685 that can be paid for with fund balance. We have a healthy fund balance of about $7 million. We can draw that down somewhat by paying for those one-time costs. It still required a number of cuts, and the deficit in the budget stands right now at, I believe it's, Rick, 501.
Yes, $501,470.
Yeah, $501,470. Those costs can all legitimately be paid for with fund balance because the amount of the one-time payments actually exceeds the deficit right now. So
Say that again, Tom?
the amount of the one-time payments exceeds the amount of the deficit. So we can legitimately pay for these one-time costs with fund balance. The one thing we don't want to get into is paying recurring costs with fund balance. Those should be funded by revenue sources, including taxes and fees. So I guess that the first order of business is to go through and take a look at the items that were removed, that were cut from the budget, and one way of looking at it is that with only a $501,000 deficit and $615,000 worth of one-time expenses, you actually do have a little bit of room to put some things back into the budget. They're not one-time costs. They would all be recurring costs, and again, we would caution the board against that, but you do have a little bit of room to do that. However, that's not sustainable. That would be
Hey, Chair, if you want to pick up on CNN, do it on your time, will you?
Tom, are you talking about a total of approximately $1.1 million being available from the fund?
no. Well, I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Well, you had a number of 501,000 and you had a number of 615,000.
Yeah, those are not added together. The $615,685 is the total amount of one-time payments that we can use
Right.
fund balance for. That's not to be added to the current deficit. That's just, we're leaving the amount of the deficit in there to use fund balance. That's how the fund balance gets eaten up, is by running deficits. So what I'm saying is the amount of money that we can spend on one-time items actually exceeds the deficit. So if we took all those things, when we take all those things out of there, you actually have about $114,000 left.
When you, when you made these cuts, did you go back and ask them to review and ask what they could cut before you cut them?
Well, the items were in the memos that I sent out to the board, so they've been out there for quite a while. There were two memos that went out to the board. One was, actually, I have them up on the, this memo right here. The date is today's date. That's just because I have that in the, there's a date formula in there, but these things went out a couple.
Yeah, the original date was
several weeks ago.
11/4, Tom.
Okay, 11/4.
I have it.
But these are the kind of things that we're in here talking about, the website design, single audit. Some of these things were added back in because the disaster recovery plan is a one-time payment. And drop down here and look at some of the other things. So, yeah, these ideas have been out there for a while. They're not new.
Okay, I'm not understanding. So you did ask them to review and see what they could cut?
Not specifically. This memo went out to everybody. They saw what was being recommended to cut.
Ultimately, it's the board decision to cut or not.
I understand that. I was just asking if they asked them to review what they were asking for.
But Tom, attachment 2 is the budget cuts. Attachment 1 are one-time payments that you're recommending we pay, we agree to do, right?
Correct. They're not the same thing. The
No.
Okay. So this. Let's see if I can make this bigger. I guess that's as big as it's going to get. Yeah, these are the one-time payments. So we have our capital outlays there. That's all of our, it's the vehicles and ambulance and things like that. And then these are all other things that aren't part of the capital but are one-time expenditures, like the single audit, disaster recovery plan, garage door safety stops, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to read them to you, but one caveat I had was this item down here, the map link, is a tool that would be part of our online services for codes and development, but there is a $1,500 annual maintenance fee that goes with that, so it's not completely one-time cost. The initial cost is $4,995, but it does come with a $1,500 annual fee. And then there's a Gettysburg Road corridor study, the saw, and then the storage tank. So all these things added together come up to $615,685.
Someone adjust the light, please.
Adjust the lights. Dave, can you lower the lights?
Turn the light down just a little bit.
These up here?
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Yeah, go ahead.
That better?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but now they, from the audience,
They have theirs back there, Pen.
Attachment 2 is these are the same essential cuts that were on the early November memo. The website design, $5,400. A part-time labor for the municipal building, $6,400, so on. This is the patrolman that was originally scheduled. Remember last year, the board had agreed to add 4 police officers, and the recommendation was to add 1 a year, but we added 2 in 2019. So the recommendation here is to postpone another one until 2021.
The ice machine?
Yeah, that's under the fire fund.
Tom, that Kalia,
Yes,
is that dropping us out of Kalia?
yes, it would. Let's come around again.
Could you explain to me how they can do without an ice machine when isn't that not completely dead, gone, finished?
Well, there's other options. There's purchasing ice from a distributor that sells ice. There's also, buying an ice machine from other types of funds, relief funds or whatever.
I think they'd have to have the ice machine.
Well, let me say, I'm not opposed to anything that's in this budget. But we had a significant deficit that we can't afford. So I hate to put it down in the lowest terminology, but you're either gonna have to make cuts or you're gonna have to raise taxes. It's as simple as it is. So I'm sure everybody can make an argument for everything on this list for why we should keep it. But unless you're willing to fund it, you're gonna have to cut something.
Right. Can I just pull us back, if I may, I just want to really understand the fund balance and the numbers. So I mean, I'm looking at the 2018 audit. That's what I have in front of me. So there's 4 categories in the fund balance: your general fund, capital improvement fund, other government funds, and then of course there's a total that I would assume adds all of those up. So you're saying we have a $7 million net or gross fund balance? Because what I'm seeing here at the end of 18, and just in the general fund column, is almost $8 million, like $43,000 away from $8 million, which is here nor there. But then I just want to understand the capital improvement fund, the other governmental funds, because added together with what I'm seeing at the end of 18 is a total of over $10 million. And I understand that some of that probably is already accounted for based on its allocation, whether it's the other, however the other government funds get allocated. And I think it'd just be healthy for us to really just understand
You're looking at,
where we
on
came
page,
from. Because 17's right under it.
page 29, the unassigned fund balance,
Well, my
$7,716,000.
tablet's showing that it's page 39. I'm just kind of running up. The index says it's around 31, 32, but I think it's the category, and then it gets down to table number 4, which is summary of governmental change in fund balance. Years ended December 31, 2018, and 2017. And I just want to understand how we're getting there and make sure we're just talking apples to apples here.
Yeah, I have a footnote on that page. I'm looking at page 29, the balance sheet.
Okay.
You need to go fund by fund, the general fund and its unassigned fund balance. So that would be 7.7 million for the general fund at the end of the year. That would
At
be
the-
the fund balance.
Okay, 7.7?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's a little off of what I'm seeing. I'm not sure how we get there and that, but I'm sure there's an explanation of having to backfill something. I mean, I can show you what I'm looking at, Rick. I'm not trying to make this difficult, but I just really feel like I want to understand when I'm trying to do my own research on stuff. I feel like I can't quite get there. That's what I'm looking at.
Oh, the MD&A. Yeah, that, yeah, I mean, that's close, but I think the official number you want to look at would be on page 29, which would be the unassigned fund balance, pretty much very close to the bottom of the page. And the MD&A table is the fund balance, but it's broken out a little bit differently.
Okay. Well, for some reason, I can't bring 29 up on this, but that's okay. So you're saying our fund balance at the end of 18, starting 19, was 7.7?
Yes.
And then what do we project for, I mean, I'm assuming we're projecting a surplus for 19, right?
Yeah.
A surplus for 19?
No?
No, darn, where did I put that?
It was around 7 million. is what you sent me was
Yeah, it was about that.
6.9,
So
give or
we
take.
dug into it a little bit
100
for
or
19?
200,000. Yes,
Okay, gotcha.
that was primarily due to the ambulance.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, you're, well, I'm sorry. I
No,
didn't
no,
mean
that's
to-
okay.
But-
I thank you for kind of explaining that. As you can imagine, it's hard for a person that's not an accountant to try to understand some of this stuff. And, you know, I just have had conversations with you about it and stuff like that, and I'm glad that, I know it's different because how we account for things is different than how sometimes it gets laid out at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. So you're saying it's around $7 million, so we're back to, you know,
It sounds like a lot of money. I mean, 15% of that is 2.1 million. But then, that's not the only thing we do with fund balance. If you want to avoid a tax increase during a recession, you're going to need a minimum of $2 and probably $2 million, and a maximum of about $3 million. Where Tom is going to talk about the fire fund here in a little bit, and that may require $2 million. Then you have contingencies like the $750,000 that we pledged for the pedestrian bridge, which is fine. We're used to having that kind of money available to take care of those opportunities. So I'd keep at least $1 million for that, and that pretty much eats up the fund balance. Now, I'm not saying you can't draw down some, but I would definitely keep it to a minimum until we have a better plan. Right now, we have basically 3 financial plans that are very important. I mean, I say that not just because having a plan keeps taxes as low as absolutely possible in the long run, but other things like our bond rating, for example, is greatly impacted by these plans. And we had these plans in place for many, many years until the last 2 years. And we need to, I think, bring these back into some type of plan before we spend too much money, before we go down the road without a plan and find out, you know, it's more difficult than what we were hoping.
right. So 50, like the fiscal policy that the board came up with years ago to have a fund balance was around 15%. And so that's roughly just under $2 million, right? Over 2
2.1.
$2.1 million,
Currently,
where
yeah.
we're gonna be. And you're saying $3 million, if we have a recession, is what it would take in the minimum to make sure
Well,
you don't have to
maximum.
raise
Yeah.
taxes or cut services.
Yeah, if you
A
don't
whole
want
lot.
to, yes, if you
Okay.
want to maintain
I got
level of services without raising
Okay.
taxes.
Why don't we have a plan in place now that we've had?
Because spending eroded it. I mean, there's 3 plans. There was a 5-year capital plan. There was a long-term fire apparatus replacement plan, and there was a kind of nebulous but still kind of useful tax plan as far as how far the last tax increase would take us. And that was contingent upon no new major hiring. So, I mean, when you hired the new police officers, that's a lot of money. And that was not considered when we did the last tax increase. So that put some pressure on the general fund. The capital plan went pretty much the same way, and through the ad hoc committee, there was a new fire plan came out, fire apparatus. All of these now require more money than what we are used to spending, or at least I should say that it's been the norm for quite some time. So if you want to increase that level, that's fine. I mean, there's no problem with that. I'm just saying we need to have these things envisioned in our mind in a way to fund them to keep the absolute minimum burden on the taxpayer that we can. Tom, I believe, is prepared tonight to talk about the fire fund part of that. You may want to keep the rest of the budget at an absolute minimum and discuss those in future years. I mean, it's up to you.
But
I was just looking at this $501,000 deficit. And I'm trying to tie that in, Tom or Rick or both, or with the cuts on attachment two. Are we somehow backfilling into that 501,000 somehow? So that we.
The 501,000 would be, it would be caused by the assets, the capital spending, and the one-time purchases. But what we're saying is it's okay to have that deficit in there, but all of these, wrong thing. All of these budget cuts are already out of this budget. So all these things you see on this list are not in that budget list.
And that's attachment two.
That's attachment two. They've all been removed from the budget. So
Okay.
what you see left in there causing the deficit are the capital expenditures and one-time payments.
So when you say it's okay that that's there, we're gonna go to the fund balance and balance the budget.
Correct.
and then come next year, they come back again, and what happens?
Well, those payments won't come back again because they're one-time payments, but you will have more assets next year. There will be more cars to replace, there will be more trucks to replace, and.
And
you-
there'll
I
be
mean,
more deficit there, and
You-
that means then we're gonna have to hit the residents with a tax increase.
You're
And which
absolutely-
is gonna be higher than it would be if we do the 125 this year.
You're correct, absolutely right.
And so instead of having a 125 this year, we'll hit them with a 3 point something or other next year.
Well, I don't know if those numbers are accurate, but you're on the right track.
Well, I think
Like,
though,
I think that's what Rick prepared, he gave the board the last budget meeting, was a 5-year projection that showed a tax increase that would come now, as opposed to 5 years from now, was significantly lower.
So rather than give small increments, we'll wait a couple of years and then we'll give them a $500 or $600 in
Well,
tax
it's
increase.
actually, the increments is what caused the problem. You know, you don't want, if you do it incrementally every year, or every other year for 5 or 6 years, that comes up to a larger number than if you were to pick one, like, I think the number that he gave you on your memo the last time was over a 5-year period that added up to about 2.6 mils.
yeah. that's right.
Whereas if you did one to cover everything this year, it'd be 1.4. So, yes, you're on the right track. It saves more earlier on.
Just back up a second, though. I mean, there is some excess fund balance, and you can draw it down. And what I'm saying here is that we take care of one plan at a time. We can deal with the fire fund this year, and everybody else is just gonna have to be patient until we come up with a funding plan for everything else you wanna do. That way, I think we'll have a little bit better understanding of exactly what it is you wanna do, and we can fund it in the best possible way. For this year, I don't think we're gonna have those plans in place between now and the time we have to have the budget on the table.
You're saying we would have a plan in place for what we would have to do in the subsequent year?
Yes, that's
Tax-
right,
Right, between now and the end of this fiscal year.
yes. Because there were a lot of ideas came out, and there were a lot of good ideas. And I'm sure there's things you will want to do. It's just that the plans were already disrupted, and that's creates a real danger financially, especially a few years down the road for the taxpayers. So all I'm saying is, let's do this carefully, a little bit more slowly, and let's pull in all the components, including the tax plan, exactly what it is you want to do, everything, and put it all together.
The majority of the board last year did not listen to yours and the manager's recommendation and the plan that was in place. And therefore, it threw the plan off track when we went with 2 police officers. And that needs to be noted, and I would hope that the board would look at why we pay these people, Rick especially, who's looking at the financial part of it, and pay attention to their recommendations.
with all due respect, Commissioner Shin, we would be very close to this, in the same boat, had we gone with a partial version last year, in my opinion. And I believe that the bigger issue is whether or not this board moving forward wants to maintain a certain kind of service level with regard to public safety. I think we're going to be faced with this monster in the short term, regardless of what we did last year, and I think we should just move forward from here, frankly.
That's what I like about America. We can agree to disagree.
I don't think we were off track by hiring police officers that kept our residents safe, you know. I think we did what we had to do. And, I mean, where would we be if we wouldn't have hired them? And what's gonna happen if we don't keep our fire company? The issue is at hand.
Well, the fire companies, the fire services fund is a different animal, and we'll address that in a little while when we're done with the general
And,
fund. I agree with you, and there's things in the budget right now that would help us do that, but we're gonna talk about that in a little while. But for the general fund, spending has just increased quite a bit over the years. And, and some of it's, well, let's face it, personnel costs are the most expensive. That's the largest part of our budget. So every time we hire somebody full-time, we're adding not only salary, but we're adding benefits to that. So we've hired quite a few people, not just in the,
I want to ask you about this, Tom. I don't want to get off beaten here, but what is this where if we go back to 8 hours?
yeah, that's, Dave and I had a conversation about that this morning. I'm not sure that number is accurate. What I do know is that in the EMS department, just a couple years ago, our overtime was about $25,000. Now it's $112,000. There's a couple reasons for that. One, we had some people out on workers' comp. We had some part-timers leave us, and we had trouble filling those spots. But a lot of it has to do with every single person who's a full-time person that's working a 12-hour shift is guaranteed 8 hours of overtime per pay period. And that's because EMTs are not included in the same law as police officers and firefighters, where they can work an 80-hour work week and not get it charged overtime. EMTs aren't included in that. So when they work a 48-hour week, regardless of whether the week, before that was 36 or not, when they work a 48-hour week, they're going to get 8 hours of overtime. That's one of the reasons it's caused our overtime to jump up. So we have now a pretty full contingent of full and part-time EMTs and paramedics. I'm suggesting that, I know there's going to be problems in the schedule filling gaps, but we fill them with part-time people. We certainly have enough of them.
Yeah, I'd say definitely go back to 8 hours.
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
Why did we cut Kalia?
It's come up every budget year for the past couple of years, of whether we wanted to stay in Kalia, whether we thought it was worthwhile. It's expensive, maybe not this year because there's no assessment going on, but I mean, we're paying salaries for people to keep Kalia up. We have at least, 3 or 4 people going to conferences every year, and then there's the annual fee. I know the arguments. Everybody said we want to keep that because, the prestige or the standards that it enforces the officers. I know one former commissioner here wanted to know if the officers would work to those standards with or without Kalia. I don't know the answer to that. Nobody can answer that. I'm putting this on here as it's not a need. I don't see it as a need. I see it as a nicety.
Well, I understand nicety, need or what, but I'm looking at what's in the budget right now, defined as Kalia expenses, and I get roughly $19,000. Between the labor costs, the the Chiefs program, the CLIA conference, 3,500. The CLIA fee, 3,800. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, that's about right.
I'm dating myself, and we fought hard, this township, to gain that recognition. And it's not just because it looks nice. We were one of the few in Pennsylvania, one of the earliest in Pennsylvania to go to CLIA. We were one of, I think we were one of 3 or 4 perhaps in Pennsylvania at the time when we first went into it. And we got to the point that our citizens looked up to it. Once we advertised it, they looked up to them. Now, all of a sudden, look around, we're gonna have to strip the CLIA advertising off the vehicles. We're going to have to drop everything that's got any association with CLIA to it, visible. And I don't know, maybe it's me.
Well, Commissioner Young, last year, we really went round and round on this and hashed it out. And I think even Captain Crone would agree that, or Director Hall, that there's more and more and more there. It helped me out with some of the details with respect to how often they ask us to do certain things, and they just keep piling on more. And I'm just want Commissioner Young to be a part of what we talked about last year, some of the nuances, you know.
There were a large amount of standards. What we did was we chose a separate program that created less standards, created less work. But, you heard me, I'm not gonna give my spiel, but I will tell you that I don't look at it as just a prestige thing. Been involved in it in a long time, and I look at it as no different than when Rick has a financial audit. It is an independent audit of how we do policing. And I think that counts
Have they
a lot.
backed off some of what it seemed very, encroachment is the only word that comes to my mind.
No,
Yeah.
we do less standards. Leon would know the number, but
Yeah, so there's an advanced accreditation and a now regular accreditation. Regular used to be advanced, around. We're doing roughly 179 standards, and we set roughly 400 standards. However, each year we take a portion of those standards, roughly 20 files, give or take, with their respective rural offices annual basis.
So they used to come in every 5 years, is that right?
We started out 5 years, and then went to 3 years. Now the major audit will go to 4 years.
Oh.
Essentially spot check.
So is it anything different from what we talked about last year with respect to the,
just less standards.
okay, so we were able to choose
Right.
to go with a lesser,
We reduced our burden.
okay, That's good to
after
know.
last year.
that's good to know.
Doesn't change in terms of cost, but what it does too is by adding our part-time person to do those files, we're paying someone far less than I was paying Leon to sit and do the same job. So there was actually a savings in terms of going to managing the
Mhm.
program that way, even though there's a cost
Mhm.
associated.
Yeah.
And if you recall, Commissioner, we asked for a full-time compliance specialist. That was simply the additional part-time hours that existed already before we added 5 hours to that. And we're handling that.
Mhm.
Is that the CALIA labor cost item, Leon, $10,970?
That's
PT
correct.
office salary.
Okay, so to maintain CALIA, we would pay the CALIA fee and that $10,970 if we did not attend the conferences, right?
Correct.
And that's, we've been attending other years of conferences for a little while now. We can not attend a conference in 2020. We can use, forego that conference in 2020. We're going to do that because it is what it is.
So there are two, if I'm reading this correctly, there are two conferences listed.
The same conference, it's just two different cost centers.
Oh,
One's
oh,
for
oh,
police,
okay.
one's for public safety.
Okay.
All right, well, Leon, what, as the guy who has to get the troops through this process and get them to adhere to the standards and so forth, what's your opinion of Kalia?
I think it's an excellent management tool. Tells us what things should be doing, forces us to take over things we might not think in the past.
Isn't there some cost reimbursement or cost savings by becoming, by being a member of COLA that's passed down?
I think you're
The-
talking about our insurance.
Pardon me?
I think-
Yeah, the insurance savings is not, doesn't come anywhere near the cost, so, I mean, there is some benefit, but it's not that much, it's maybe $500-600 a year.
I guess Director Hall or Leon, if, let's just say if it was taken out, where do you see us in a year and in 2 years? I mean, roughly, I mean, like, I guess it'd be with higher end, with the. No, not just the conference, if CALIA was taken out. I mean, we gotta start talking about the nuts and bolts here of this.
Where we are in 1 year, 2 years, probably not going to see a huge difference in what we're experiencing, but it's going to occur in the long run.
In the long run.
As we get further away from our active compliance with those standards, taking care of the costs and stuff, guys, 5 years down the road, see some spreading happening, it's not going to be chaos and Armageddon, but it's certainly going to be more difficult when we get all the departments and all sorts of that. Filing, we had a situation like that last year, we had a request for resignation to apply to the defense of a particular case. You could get that information if we were prepared to comply with that. However, there's a scheme to quash the DA's office. We never had to produce the information. If we weren't following the things that they're holding us to, I think we would have had a lot more labor, a lot more difficulty producing that information. So there's one situation where we dodged a bullet there and we didn't have to produce the information, or we could, more easily, and we had to not follow it.
Right.
Because you're managing the system intentionally. Okay.
And the reason I'm asking is because in my opinion, if we see value in CALIA and keeping it, which I have from the beginning, since I've been here, I don't see why, punching out one of the fragments of cost of that total, of what makes all of those, in this case, the conference, which I think is a very important part of staying in tune and in touch on the regular basis. I think missing that would not be healthy for being in the program, to be honest with you. Again, in my view, I mean, you're looking at a $3,500 budget expense for the conference. So I think if we hang on to CLIA, then we should hang on to the parts that have been budgeted for it.
It's 5,000, but that's,
Let's see, 3,500.
yeah, for both.
Oh, there's the two, okay, gotcha.
Dave, I see they've taken out license plate reader.
They've taken out the maintenance on the server.
I'm sorry?
That's,
It's the maintenance on the
it
server.
hasn't been taken out, it was never in.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
If you're looking at attachment 3, those are the things that were requested but not included in the budget draft.
Okay, so that is not something that was an ongoing thing, the license plate readers?
It is.
It's-
We actually, we had it in the original, so it kind of is taken out.
Well, it was taken out,
You just not added it back in.
that's right.
That was something we were experimenting with, and we got some money to work with it, right?
No, we got them actually for nothing.
Well, okay.
By the vendor.
So what's the 5453 then?
That's the maintenance on the server. The mall
Okay.
donated money towards the server.
Okay.
And then we paid the difference of the server. The server's housed here, but
Mhm.
all of the data from the license plate reader goes there. So,
So if we don't continue it, it's gone?
right. So it includes the cameras. Okay. I had Doug do a report for me. Here are all of the hits that we have in the license plate. The problem is if you don't pay the maintenance and something happens, now you're paying for that, for the cost of that fix. The other benefit too is, I mean, this is robberies that have gone through it, retails. I've said all along, it's a value add. It's a crime control function. And Greg's gonna be meeting with some of the chiefs from the area because they're looking at using our servers, so there's the potential for that use being a revenue source. We just don't know what that number is, because we have to negotiate what the agreement is. There's probably 4 or 5 other departments in the area that would be interested in and willing to, just like we do with the simulator, it's the same back. The department can pay us to provide the simulator. We could do the same thing.
So if we don't keep it up, then,
If we don't keep it up and something happens to it, we're coming back and saying, I need X amount of dollars to fix it.
We don't keep it up, the bottom line is this, we have roughly $20,000 worth of cameras and software that we have present. We bought a $6,000 server that we have present. We've been running it for 6 months, installed something close to 50 clients for it. Something that we're using actively right now. We'd like to see what protect one piece full in my 20-odd years here. That's if that funding is not funded, they put it certain way. It doesn't, like if something breaks, we don't fix it, they put it certain way. The software is certain way. We have a $6,000 server that we can't use for anything. We're gonna have to sell probably in Newberry, who's bought into this program and already part of distribution. But we're gonna get different lives, or we're gonna have to go somewhere else and deal with this stuff. This is something that's in progress. We're actually being kind of deep. To not pay that sets us back.
So, the list that you showed us, Dave, are some of those situations where the license plate reader actually helped to solve crime? Repeat that, Leon?
The list is, directly from Madison, across there, license plate reader packaging, every single one. I think that's the two fellows from the Bedford graph, time crimes, everything, like the traffic or warrant services or, things of that nature. But that's a pretty extensive list of things that would not have been solved otherwise. That's the license plate.
You can see robberies and burglaries on that list. And in many of these cases, we had no idea, who the vehicle was. And only by tracking it through the LPR did we will be able to follow through this.
It's 4 pages. Why are we even discussing this?
It's a page and a half.
We need 4 pages.
Two sides.
You get one, you get to keep one.
Oh, you're passing these out?
Yes. It's 2 sides to 1 page.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
May I just get real with staff? Does anyone understand that this is not an easy task and that everybody has their pet project? And no matter how we do this, somebody's going to walk away from here unhappy. And I'm sorry. maybe I'm the long in the tooth here, but, no matter what you bring, you know, you get the feeling that we're down on, you know, if I vote against something, I'm down on the police, or vote on something, I'm down on EMS, or I'm down on fire. Not down on anybody. I just don't know how we make it all come together and realize that there are people, I mean, is it fair, Rick, to say that maybe I'm taking it personally, that the township is aging, that there are probably a lot of fixed incomes out there? Do we have any numbers on what those, you know, what those logistics look like?
I don't have any empirical numbers on that. I'm kind of anxious to see the census.
If I may follow up on what Commissioner Shin was saying, and I know I'm reiterating something I said before, but I can stand up here and argue for every single one of these things.
Yeah. And I
You
can
know,
buy
I'm
them.
not opposed to any of them.
Right.
The point is, they are ongoing costs. They're going to be here every year, and if we're going to have to pay them, we're already overdrawn. We're already paying out more than we're taking in. So the board asked me to find some things to cut. I would like, the reason I included this on here was because I would like for the board to consider the core mission of the police department, that's to serve the residents of Lower Allen Township. This is a great tool. Nobody's arguing that. Look at the list. But how many of those things that they pulled over affected our residents? You know, if it's a shoplifting or whatever, a burglary or something, and somebody hits, where was the burglary committed? Was it on one of our residents? Was it somewhere in Harrisburg, or was it somewhere in East Pennsboro? It's a great tool. We're absolutely solving crimes, but we're a local agency. We're not a county, a state, or a federal agency.
Well, that came to mind on that item, and I am curious to know, I mean, is it adding to our obligated time? Okay, so you're not just getting pings, like, hey, this dude's coming from Hagerstown.
But they're getting those too.
But do you have to chase them down?
What's a tag list?
Somebody has a tag that probably should be in more of the insurance, vehicle insurance, fire, flood.
I mean, I guess you can also look at it and say it's good policing to to take care of crime no matter where we're at, right?
I would disagree with that. I think the core mission is to serve and protect the Lower Allen citizens.
Well, John, you were getting ready to start a presentation, and I'm part of
No,
the
this
reason
is,
you're
I
not.
mean, this is it, essentially. We're just going through, and
Okay.
as I said, if you want to add any of these things in, whether it's from attachment 2 or attachment 3, I mean, we just have to pay for it. I can go through some tax information if you're interested in seeing that. I don't even know if that's something that you're considering.
Tom, I
would
wanted to
hope we
ask
would
you,
consider
you know, I saw in your memo, you said about this fire assistant, that somebody here, the girls in the office could do that?
Fire assistant.
Did I read that
Oh.
right?
Yes, they asked for, and this mostly was due to Bill Zorn stepping down as the kind of guy that does everything in the park. And they asked for an administrative assistant for $11,700 a year to help out with things like that. My belief is that we have staff that can handle that already. We brought on Captain Worth a couple years ago to handle administrative duties. You also have a public safety secretary, an executive secretary, that I can't speak to her schedule, I don't know how busy she is. But rather than hire another person to take care of, essentially paperwork, then we push that around to people that we already have, paid people we already have on staff.
And that's something that would get done, though.
I'm sorry?
And that was something that would get done.
Oh, it have to. It has to, the items have to get done. They can't find any volunteers to step up and take over for Mr. Zorn.
So I mean, Commissioner Shin hit the nail right on the head. The pink elephant in the room is that, you know, we're gonna have to make some tough decisions. I mean, the bottom line is if everything got funded, it's my understanding a couple budget meetings ago that the tax increase, if the prudent thing was to do a one-time tax, or not a one-time, I can't believe I actually said that, but to do one, a bigger one now, so you don't have to do one hypothetically for years down the road. I mean, that number, I think we discovered is probably close to triple what the last one was 2 years ago. And so, I don't see that happening. I don't see me voting for a tax increase that would be triple the last one.
You slept at 3.03, Dean, 3.03 mils.
The one, when we talked about a 1.4 mil increase, the last increase was somewhere around just under half a mil, correct? Total, with all of them, back in 2017 for the 18 budget. So,
Yeah, it was around there.
right, so I mean, that's triple the last tax increase. I think, you know, just to know that information out here right now makes us kind of think, oh yeah, maybe we should talk about some of this stuff. So, but I think we should talk about some of this stuff. I think it's important that we do, because public safety is extremely important. Nobody wants to be unsafe. And I'm not sure if there's any other items that are related to public safety that can be talked about, but I guess we're talking about this stuff tonight. So I guess my first question would be, you know, you look at the big numbers, we're looking at the patrolmen, number 3. The 2 that were added this year. I mean, what's the impact? Let's talk about the impact and how, what that's done. Let's talk about, you know, the possibility, I suppose, since it's suggested to be postponed, possibility of postponing it. I think we gotta talk about some of these tough things tonight, if we can, if you don't mind. So I guess my question is, I guess my first question is the 2 police officers that we hired for this year, I'm assuming it's making an impact on the
There's no impact whatsoever to the department.
oh, I see, okay.
So as far as realizing what their impact is, not much.
Right.
Other than cost, I mean, that, we tend to hire people in the middle of the year, beginning July 1st. So when you look at the budget, and you're saying, well, we're gonna bring on 2 people, that's gonna cost us, you know, $62,000 total, whatever it is, because we're paying them for half a year. But then you gotta keep in mind that the following year, there's an entire year's salary in there, and that's $130,000. So 2 people is $130,000, and that just, it keeps going up, because the thing to keep in mind is, under our current collective bargaining agreement, not only do they go up in their first 5 years 5% steps, but the steps themselves are adjusted by the amount of the contract rate. This year, it happens to be 4% a year in the current contract. So the rates themselves are being adjusted upwards by 4%, and then they're making this 5% jump. So essentially, during their first 5 years, you're getting 9% increases a year. That adds up. That's a significant amount of cost.
So if last year, the board went with the plan to hire 1 last year and 1 this year, I mean, would you anticipate that the contract would be okay for 2020 at this point?
If you're asking me, I presented ad nauseam the tax standards projected to be on the one on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick. What I'd like to do, I'd like to give some structure to this discussion instead of jumping all around. I'd like to go through the lists and go to each item and give the experts the opportunity to respond to them and have the commissioners have the opportunity to ask questions about them. And if everybody agrees to that, are we okay with that? And
Worthwhile.
attachment number 1, we're basically saying is taken care of by excess funds, correct, Tom?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that's out of consideration for this list cruise. Attachment number 2, Tom, do you want to lead the discussion on this and go down each one?
Well, sure. The website design, again, a lot of this is going to be repeated from the memo that went out early in November. The website design is a tool to help our younger, well, not just the younger, but we know that more people want to do things interactively on the website. They want more township services access to the website. We don't have any professional design people on staff to help with that. We've redesigned the website a couple of times. This particular company, for $5,400 a year, this is a recurring cost. They would implement a design that's been used in other municipalities and seems to work okay. It's like a portal for township services. Is it necessary? No. It's a nice tool.
You say it's $5,400 recurring each year.
Yes. Well, $5,400 this year, I'm sure there's probably increases that come down the road. They probably increase it 2-3% a year, my guess.
Tom, is that 5,400, is that the 450 per month? Does that break down to 450 per month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we have
correct.
nobody here that can design a website?
No.
Oh, they could design a website, but not like the interactive
Yeah,
website.
we can
that
design a
goes
web,
with this.
we've designed a website, we have a website, it's just not professional. We don't have any professional web developers on staff.
This goes into the ability to, if you want to rent the barn or something, you can fill out,
Correct.
do it right on the website as opposed to having to contact somebody at the office or get a paper.
Do just about anything, you know, you could submit building plans and applications and a lot of things.
Okay, commissioners, straw vote. Do you want to keep this or delete it?
Delete it.
What about the rest of the commissioners?
What's that?
Keep it.
You're saying keep it, Ted?
I don't want to cut it, I don't want to cut it out. You know what this is?
Yes,
I don't want to cut any of this stuff out.
I don't either.
On attachment 2.
I see it. I got it in front of me.
Well, but that's what I'm asking, Dean. You're saying,
Well,
we
none
could
of
do
us
this
wanna-
quickly and say, we're going to
Well,
keep everything.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, okay, I mean, I guess, yeah, let's just go through it.
All those in favor of keeping, say aye.
Wait, who's running this meeting? So what did you say, Dean? What's your vote?
What, yes, mine's gonna be, I would probably say we should keep all of these things in. I don't see, and, yeah.
Okay, so, good point. We'll go through this so that if anybody has questions, I'm voting yes to the website design. Rick?
I think it's important. I would say yes.
Okay, so
4 to 1.
What?
4 to 1.
Who's the one? Oh, okay.
Caroline.
the next item, part-time labor, that is, here at the municipal building, we've been hiring people to work during the summer, full-time during the summer. What Scott Emerson had asked was that we decrease the weekly hours to 20, but we make it year-round, so that during the winter, they can catch up on some inside maintenance that needs to be done, such as, you know, painting and whatever else needs to be done. The building's 11 years old. There's things inside that need to start happening.
So this would relate to the township building,
Correct.
inside and outside.
Yes. Maintenance of the grounds and building.
So this going from a part-time laborer to a full-time employee.
No, it'd still be part-time.
it's still only gonna be
Yeah.
part-time.
It's just more random, is that a?
Just 20 hours a week instead of, instead of full-time, but it would be year-round, so.
Oh,
We could take that part-time and let that have the fire assistant.
Possibly.
What are you saying, Carolyn?
We could take that part-time position and get use it for the fire assistant.
Instead of maintenance on the
Well,
building?
Yeah.
someone just throw Scott Emerson under the bus, so.
the,
He's not here. He's quit.
the fire assistant is under the fire services fund. We should probably deal with one fund at a time and answer that when we get down the road a bit.
You have a question?
Yes, Dave.
Oh, so you need the maintenance. Oh. So we need that, huh? Okay. Okay.
What I thought you were suggesting was that we take this same person who's working 20 hours a week on the building and give them 5 to 10 more hours to work for them. That's what I thought you were suggesting. No, she was suggesting instead of, not added to, but instead of.
Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds like from that feedback from David, this would be a yes.
Yeah.
I would take that as a yes, keep it in.
Everybody here up to me is yes? Everybody over here is yes? Yes. And Ted?
Yes?
Okay, move on, Tom.
The salary for the third, what I call the third patrolman, that is number 3 of the 4 that you decided to hire last year. If you remember, one of the recommendations last year was to do 1 per year for the next 4 years. The board decided to go 2 in the first year. So again, it's really a matter of, we talked about unobligated time, we talked about response times. The unobligated time is reducing, response times are going up. We understand that. So nobody's saying that we don't need somebody. What we're saying is that we probably have at least a little leeway to postpone it.
Right, but we're still gonna deal with this issue
That's right.
next
It's
year
gonna
or
come
the
back
year
next
after
year.
it,
Because, well, to
regardless.
answer Mr. Bonneville's question before, I don't think anybody plans on kicking this down the road more than 1 year. But you're correct, it's gonna be back again next year, and it's gonna have to be funded eventually. Yeah, the plan was to hire 4. No, the plan was to hire 4, and the recommendation was 1 a year for 4 years. So we wouldn't be any further behind by doing 2 in 2019 and none in 2020.
Do we lose anyone?
I can't hear you, sir.
I'm sorry. Don't turn me, I'm an enlisted man. Do we lose any of our current police officers in the calendar year 2020?
Who?
Oh, that's right.
But there's a replacement coming in. We're not losing any numbers.
But- Well, we're gonna make money on that deal. We're losing somebody at X dollars, and we're gonna bring someone in at this dollar. Okay.
Commissioners, how do you want to vote on this? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'd like to postpone.
I'm saying do it now.
Well, that's what I mean, do it now.
What?
You got 3 votes for yes.
That's all you
You
really
got
need.
4 votes for yes. Okay. Move on, Tom.
All right, so we're including that as well? Okay, overtime, this is the evidence technician. The dollar amount that's in there for overtime is $12,000. We're suggesting, and that was not a new item, that was just included with salary before. We just separated into a different line item. We're suggesting controlling that.
Can we really do that? Doesn't he get called out of our township?
Yes, but, you know, like many other people who get overtime, they adjust their daily schedule. So, if you stay out 2-3 hours afterwards, you come in 2-3 hours later. I'm not saying, you know, I don't know if that's workable or not, it's a suggestion.
So you're suggesting if he needs to stay out, he gets comp time?
Well, wasn't suggesting that, but yeah, that's a possibility.
This is not in your memo at the top.
No, that was not included in the early.
Will that work,
November.
Leon?
And the 12,000 was actually a historical figure. But it was just, yeah, it was just out of,
That was a historical budgeted figure, I don't think we spent that.
I don't think, we didn't have any overtime budget for it.
I'm sorry?
Came out of a different line.
No, I understand, but the amount that we spent on overtime within that line item wasn't $12,000.
No, because it involved other overtime, not just his. So that's why this was put in as a separate line, given the
Right.
historical number that he had actually earned.
So Tom, is the number I'm sorry, dude. Is the number 5,000 or is it 7,100?
We're suggesting we keep it to 5,000, which would allow you to cut 7,000
Oh,
on a $12,000 budget.
Well,
That may
he's-
not be doable, and we can adjust that by, we're gonna make it 50/50 and make it 6,000, or flip it and make it 7,000 and 5,000 the other way. The point is to control overtime.
When he's called out by other municipalities, aren't they responsible for it?
Yeah, I think you share. There's so many, I mean, you could nickel and dime each other, right?
But we pay him, don't we?
Okay.
Okay. Commissioners, how you want to vote? Ted?
We're voting to keep it at 7,100.
Right.
Well, you're either voting to cut $7,000 or cut something less than $7,000 or keep it at 12,000. Keep the total overtime at 12,000.
I liked your idea of making, like, split the difference and go with 6,000.
Let's go to that. So,
Oh,
6,000?
that's an option too.
Right.
That was Tom's idea.
So I would say, Captain Crum, what does that do? Realistically, how does that affect the service of police working Lower Allen Township, right? I mean,
what happens if you try and press to keep it there. He says, to hell with it, it's not worth it, and walks out the door.
Oh,
Well, he does quartermaster duties too, doesn't he? Okay, Ted, you said yes?
Yes. 6.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Exactly what are we voting on?
reduce the overtime from 12,000 to 6,000.
That's what you.
Cutting $6,000 out of the budget.
Instead of the 7,100, you do 6,000.
Dean?
Yeah,
you-
I'm good with the 6,000.
I'm good. Rick?
Good? Yep.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
So this next one's probably a quick one. I assume everybody wants to keep Talia in? I should make that assumption. Sorry.
I'll kick
Go ahead and
this off.
discuss.
I'll kick this off. I'm voting yes.
Yes.
We keep it.
Yep.
That's 3.
And I don't care about the decals and the notoriety. I care about the standard. Okay, we have 3 to my right. Rick?
There's no point in closing. I mean, I'm like a friggin' salmon. I just went off. I did much my career.
Marilyn?
Yep.
Okay. It's unanimous, Tom.
All right, next item is $1,000 in there. This was a new item. Probably I need either Dave or Leon's help to explain this one. It was a new item in the budget this year, which is why it's showing up on here, because it was new.
Right.
Is there any overlap? Yeah.
If you comply with those standards in the first 3 chapters,
Yeah.
so if you comply, basically they accept the deal. You're not doing the whole program, or you cater to the state. It's not in.
Well, that brings us,
Legal requirement.
that takes us to 20,805 instead of 19,000. So let's move off of it. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay? Go ahead, Tom.
Well, dropping down, skip the next one because it's also Talia. The next 2 items, supervisory development and unexpected opportunities, one of my favorite phrases. These are not suggesting cutting these out. They were just, there were increases in them, and I'm suggesting that we keep them at 2019 levels.
Well, in 10 words or less, what is supervisory development?
I'll let them explain that. to expand on that, I don't disagree with either one of these. I think they're necessary. I just suggesting you keep them at the same level.
What was the 2019 level?
Unexpected opportunities, I believe it was 2019 amount was 1,000. Rick, do you have that?
Well, that says it's 1,000.
Well, that would be, yes, reducing. It was increased to 2,000.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so these are the cutback
Yeah,
numbers?
these
Those are the cutback numbers.
Oh, okay, all right.
The items would still be in the budget. They would just be in there at the 2019 levels, which I don't recall what they are. I looked at so many line items in the past.
All right, so looking at both of
Sorry.
these items, Rick, how do you, are you voting yes or no?
I agree with these.
Carolyn?
Yeah,
I'm voting yes. Dean's voting yes.
to
Ted?
keep it
To
the
keep
2019
At,
levels.
keep it as you
Keep it
proposed.
as is.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
We'll make sure whatever's in there for 2019 stays in there for 2020.
So that's,
First year patrol classes, we're probably keeping, since we're keeping the additional officer, because that was like a contingency. If you weren't hiring the officer, there was no need for first year officer class. The overtime for full-time EMTs, this is probably gonna take a while. There's a lot to unpack with going between 8 and 12-hour shifts. If my memory serves correct, we moved to 12-hour shifts because it made scheduling a little easier without the overlapping time, shifts. But again, the issue we're facing is there's a guaranteed 8 hours of overtime for every full-time EMT and paramedic every week for our vacation. So Dave and I were talking about this morning. It was like, well, but how much overtime are we going to have if we go back to 8-hour shifts? And I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that several years ago, we were spending nowhere near this amount of overtime. And we have a lot more people working for us now than we did this year or last year. We hired a lot of people this year.
So are you, the number that's here, 112,810, is that the estimate if we go back to 8-hour shifts?
Now, that would be the amount we would be cutting out if we went back to 8-hour shifts, but I'm not certain if that's accurate because I don't know, there's no way of knowing what overtime we might need to still pay out. This is what we added for full-time EMTs and full-time paramedics. That's what the 2020 estimated budget is.
folks, being a total novice when it comes, how is that 12-hour and 8-hour impacted? Why would there be less overtime if we come back to 8 hours? Is there a simple
Well,
explanation?
the explanation I gave was that there's part of the law, FLSA, says that police officers and paid firefighters are allowed to work 48-hour week. They're on a 12-hour shift. So they can work a 3-day week and a 4-day week. It's 36 and 48, and they don't have to be paid overtime because they're just. But the law did not include EMTs. So when we put the EMTs to 12-hour shifts, when they work a 48-hour week, they're getting 8 hours overtime.
Yeah, okay.
And they're working at least, I guess, one 4-day week every pay period.
It's a pretty big number, so I would just ask, again, how will this affect, if we take it out, how will it affect the service level of our township residents? I guess that's just the bottom line is here. Do we want to cut our service levels, or do we want to maintain at least them and make them better? So I think that's a big number, so I think it's worth hearing.
Some of it, and I don't know how much, because, having just seen this earlier today, I'm not gonna even study the overtime, but I don't think I think that you go to 8-hour shifts, you're changing shifts 3 times, a day. potential to run extra calls, basically where you can add overtime. What that difference would be without doing analysis of those costs, I don't know. And some of the overtime was also driven by the fact that we had 2 people on disability. So I was covering all of those shifts with overtime because there was nobody else. We have 2 part-timers. Now, we've increased part-time. I would anticipate that we would spend less overtime. How much less overtime? I don't know. Let's get down and analyze.
But to Vice President Warren's point, we're not short-sheeting the residents if we run 8 instead of 12 hours. I mean, we're still gonna cover the cost, right?
Right.
You're still gonna cover the costs, right, but it was, one of the reasons the employees wanted to switch was because they were working some days 16-hour days. They were working 2 8-hour shifts.
Because of the fact that we were down some people.
Well, no, that was even before. When I first came here, they were working 16-hour shifts some days, and it was killing them. And so it was the employees' request to go to the 12-hour shift, much like the police department. The only problem is FLSA, for the police department allows them to have a different level schedule like the manager. That exception's not, unfortunately, it's not, that federal exception's not there for
Was it because they were getting stuck in a particular
No,
case?
that's what
Why
they're
would you
being
go,
scheduled.
why are they looking, oh, they were scheduled
They
16
were scheduled.
hours.
Right.
Well,
Well,
there's-
then you had 16 hours plus at the end of the shift, you got over, you had to stay and get overtime.
All right, so because there was poor management, we ended up trying to make a change.
Why we ended up going to 12-hour shifts. Because it's changing shifts twice a day as opposed to 3 times.
Well, since we have management now, I'd like to see us go back to 8 hours.
Tony,
Tony, what do you think?
what are the,
He's shaking his head no. I
what
think
are the,
I'm.
what are the troops like? Do they like
Am
the
I live?
8-hour
Like,
shift or
okay.
the 12 hours?
So first of all, just in complete transparency, everything everybody said is very valid, but as Mr. Renaud said earlier, the number of 112,000 is not an accurate reflection of the cost of overtime, built-in overtime, or what I call scheduled overtime for paramedics and EMTs, the 11 members of staff. Currently, scheduled overtime for ALS providers or paramedics is $32,913 estimated in the 2020 budget. For the 11 EMTs, it's $40,449, or for the 7 EMTs. That combination of $73,000 is no doubt a lot of money. But as the township manager and Director Hall and everybody is well aware of, we've done quite a hiring spree. That hiring spree only brings us up to where we need to be to operate right now. Going into the 2020 budget, there are no new requests from EMS because the plan is to maintain the schedule with 11 providers. It requires 12 to fill the schedule at 12-hour shifts. The advantage to 12-hour shifts is I never have an opening. If we're working 12-hour shifts, you're working 48-36 on a platoon. When you cut them down to 40 hours, they're working 160 hours. My week is 168 hours of 24/7 coverage. You always have an opening. That opening is going to fall to either overtime or part-time. And if it falls on night shifts or weekends, it's going to be incredibly difficult to fill, which is why it makes sense to do 12-hour platoon rotations, because you can anticipate that. The cost of hiring 2 additional employees, even if they're at the lowest rate we go, EMTs at $15 an hour for $31,000 a year, and you factor in the benefits, the factor that I used was 31.4. Director Grove gave me additional information, said it could be, we could get really lucky and go to 24% and have somebody that's single, has no dependents, doesn't take our insurance, is 24% in benefits, or we get hit with a family person, it could be as high as 70% in benefits. The worst case scenario is by leaving the building overtime, it saves us roughly $6,000 to $7,000. Or if it goes higher than that, it saves us even more. There's a cost savings in doing the schedule this way, and it does. Everybody's right, it creates overtime. The number up there of 112,000, correct me if I'm wrong, Secretary, I said 25,000 before, right? Before this year, right? So, right, so that was with certainly fewer employees than we have today. The 2020 budget is packed on 2 things. one, we're gonna be operating one FTE short. So that means right away, we have to cover 168 hours a week, or roughly, with part-time or some other staff. That doesn't factor in vacation, sick time, or anything else. And I factored that in the best I could, saying that I would need to cover 2 FTEs all year long, either with overtime or part-time. The part-time budget only went up about 3,000 or 4,000, went from 68 to 70,000. Either way, we're trying to maintain that budget to the best we can. The other thing that this does, as we were talking about, this board has done a good job, and everybody in this township has done a great job of supporting us, there's no doubt about that. But this takes, and it hits all the employees that are currently here drawing paychecks. They see a 10% reduction as soon as we do this in their pay. That's a pretty big hit for a career field that's historically underpaid. That's gonna take a big hit on that. I can't guarantee your recruitment or retention. Doesn't mean anything will change, but it certainly means it. Now, can there be some overcoming? Yes. The big deal is, beyond the 73,000 that would be billed in overtime, can we do things to control overtime costs? I believe the number estimated is 148 total. Is that what it is, Rick? 148? 148? So the difference between the 73,000 and the 148,000 is controllable overtime. There's some things that we can do without detrimentally affecting the township or the service level to control some of that some of the time. But just like everywhere else, I can't control overtime in a 24/7 business that I can't predict when calls are going to come in. The other thing to realize here is that we're in this game of EMS where competition's all around us. Everybody's done everything right to put us in a position to fairly compete. We go back and take a 10%, go back and take a 10% pay cut and a schedule that most people don't want to work anymore, that doesn't put us in a position to compete.
The 10% pay cut is if they
If you
don't
go
have
with,
the overtime.
they lose the overtime. That results for them, they see a 10% pay cut. And quite frankly, people, you can do a lot of things with people. You can change their health insurance, you can change your pension plans, which we all know we have to do, right? You start messing with their paychecks, that creates significant adversity for you, okay? And while I don't know where this is going, I do know that 12-hour shifts is a much more effective way to manage a schedule. I do know that there's a difference between the scheduled overtime of 73,000 and the 148,000. That difference can be controlled for certain. And if there's a target number that, if the target number is, 112,000 total or whatever that number is, then EMS can work towards maintaining that.
Tony, are you saying that they go to name another municipality?
Well,
They can
Geisinger's-
get the overtime for sure
Right,
there?
Geisinger's 12 hours, UPMC is 12 hours, First Aid is 12 hours.
I'm back to overtime.
So it's all the same. When I say 12-hour shifts, they're all platoon scheduled. So UPMC is a 12-hour platoon schedule between the northern tier and all the way to York County. Geisinger's 12 hours across there is a platoon schedule.
So that's 36
That's
or 48
36,
hours.
48. That's correct.
Now, and you're saying because the FSLA is not there, then the 8 hours are going to be that's automatic?
It's automatic. Township manager, everybody else is 100% correct on all those laws. The difference is it does save you money because those people are working 2,184 hours a year versus a traditional work week. That's where it saves you money because you're using less FTEs. The other thing this does is the projected FTEs during the ad hoc projected based off of 12 hours. This significantly impacts that. If, going forward, and we have no idea where that is, it significantly impacts it. There's a cost savings by having the additional hours worked. Yes, there is the overtime line item. I understand that.
So,
But in the
Tom,
long
is your-
run, it's better off.
Is your suggestion based on Captain Deegan's comments here is to leave that 112,810? Is that the number we have to live
No,
with?
that wasn't a target number, that was the number that, in the budget, that was attributable to the 8 hours overtime per pay.
Well, as we came up with this, as we kind of threw the dice and came up with 6,000 for the other overtime, can we find a number that we?
Well, I think Tony's suggesting that what's 148, it's in there now.
148.
73. So we're looking more at a $75,000 number to control it. That's not
Yes.
that we'll cut it all, but it's controlled.
But we would want to erase, I've changed my, am I allowed to change my mind? I would not go back, you've erased it already. I would not go back to 8 hours. I would not go back to 8 hours.
Well, Tony, that's your recommendation. Stay at 12.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes, sir,
what-
I think that a couple of things when it comes to this is, I think that, well, I would love the board to make a decision tonight, of course, in EMS's favor. I think in fairness and responsibility, I think that if the board wants to do that, it's great. If not, this is something myself, Dave, and the township manager need to have further discussion on. But we certainly can reduce that number and have a target, and still allow us to not hit the employees with a 10% pay reduction, you know, significantly reduce our ability to compete and effectiveness in the market. I think we have to maintain those things.
Well, I heard that over and over in the ad hoc, okay?
Yes, sir.
That the EMTs are kind of a hot commodity, so to speak, and, no, I mean, and there's a high demand
So
for
there's,
them.
so there's an interesting number there. In 2012, this was put out by the American Ambulance Association of Pennsylvania, because we're currently fighting a House bill right now. In 2012, there were 56,700 certified EMS providers in the state. As we stand here today, there are 16,700. We've seen a reduction in 40,000, and now we're handling 2 million calls a year across the Commonwealth. These people are certainly in crisis, and you know it is that kind of a business. But again, the township has done all the right stuff to put us in a competitive position. I mean, I've been here for 6 months, and I've probably driven everybody crazy with hiring and memos and everything else. But they've allowed me to do that and get us to where we need to be. I certainly can control the overtime above schedule. I mean, that number above the scheduled overtime, you know, we're looking at scheduled overtime of around 75,000. But that between the 148 that we proposed, can that be controlled? We can certainly do our best to achieve a target that's you know, something somebody wants us to achieve. It's not gonna be without pain.
Well, Mr. President, I'm, after this, this education that I received, I'm voting for the 75,000. I'm cutting the
Not going back to 8 hours.
correct,
Keeping it full.
yes.
Ted, 12 or 8?
Yeah, 12.
Yeah, I'd say stay at 12, not because they guys expect 12 hours overtime pay, but I'd say stay with 12.
Okay, it's unanimous. Tom, move on.
Okay. Tony, might as well stay up here. EMS professional development, $4,000 budgeted in that. We can go into detail on what that would entail.
Just quite frankly, if this is something you guys want to cut, this really primarily just affects me. This was in here for me to do some stuff that we'll just have to either push down the street or do something else in here. This was for me and another staff member to do. If we need to push that down the street, we can do that. That's up to you. This was for me to attend NFA, National Fire Academy courses, which provide us with the next level of leadership, executive fire officer and those type of programs, and NAEMT, National Association of EMTs, for me to get some advanced education and instructing advanced life support and basic life support. That's what that $4,000 was targeted for, myself and one other person to do those things.
Is that in your memo, Tom?
No,
Okay.
that was a new
I-
item that was picked up.
I see the AEMT, but I don't see this.
So the AMT is professional development for a staff member who's currently enrolling. One of the goals and recommendations of the ad hoc committee was for us to move to an AEMT program when we can and how fast we can. We already own the equipment, we already own the assets, we already own the resource. What we need is people. We've got an EMT that wants to go, she wants to further herself, she's put in a request, and so we put in a request for her to take the additional education. How does it benefit us? Well, hopefully the county's new CAD goes live in August, and we can start running. What that means is, currently on the unit that we have in service as a BLS, we can make that an I or intermediate truck, which means we bill at a $1,600 advanced life support rate for that unit versus $700 BLS rate when it goes out. So it does have an advantage for us and is in our long-term plans. And that is something that, you know, of the 4,000 and 1,400, I'd much rather keep the 1,400 to benefit the staff.
So we vote, I would vote no for the EMS professional development for the capital. No, I would take Tony's recommendation to say yes to AEM. That's my,
Well, let's take these one at a time.
okay, I did.
For the EMS professional development, Dean?
I just have to ask Tony, exactly with that professional development, you're saying that's just stuff that you prefer to do, or is it gonna be necessary to?
Well, it certainly is going to enhance my professional development as an individual. There's a course called Executive Fire Office down at the National Fire Academy that lasts a couple of years, has some expenses to it that I'd like to take and some investments in it as well. And the National Association of EMTs is a fairly expensive conference that is one of those things that I'm already a national EMT instructor in 5 disciplines to provide to our staff. This is all education that I'd be providing to our staff to keep them current. So it flows down. And not just EMS staff, the fire department benefits as well, all of their EMTs, and some of it, a couple of those courses benefit the civilian population. So that's what that was put in there. But if that needs cut or cut in half, then that's so be it, because I'd much rather have that one cut than the AMT cut.
Take it off.
Yeah, I would certainly say to cut it if we feel that that's
Cut the whole thing or
the four.
cut the part of it?
Or is there an option to cut part?
Yeah, he said it. Tony, didn't you say there was an option to cut part of the 4,000?
There's always that option, sir. You cut it and tell me what the budget is, and that's what I have to live with. So if you decide to cut it, then I'll make adjustments to that.
So what are we voting on? Could you find 4,000 somewhere else, Tony, if you don't put this
Oh,
in?
that's always possible. That's always possible. We get down to July, if the budget's looking good, me and the director meet every single month on the
No.
budget, so there's always possible.
Probably everybody here has had to deal with a budget sometime in their
And
career.
I understand that. I mean, I do, so.
Cut the whole thing?
Well, I would be in favor of cutting it down if the parents will get it back, if that's an option.
He's saying he would work for that.
Okay.
Cut it in half?
If I'm making a recommendation, I have no idea how much you would need.
But Tony, what you're saying is you'll work to whatever we grant, right?
Yes, sir. In that category, absolutely. I can work with whatever it is I mean, in any category, I have to, so, but definitely in that category. You tell me what it is, and that's what we'll do. So.
Well, the AMET, he said he really prefer not to cut that.
That's for a staff member who's really putting her heart and soul in. She's already
Okay.
studying every week. She's really trying.
We're talking about the 4,000.
Yeah, okay.
Just somebody to tell us what we're going to do. All right, I would be in favor of splitting difference and going with $2,000.
Okay, Ed?
To the EMS professional development.
So here's a
Yes.
note. In the professional development, Captain Worth has already taken,
2,000?
so in the professional development, Captain, sir, Captain Worth has already taken the Executive Fire Officer program, so he has that certification, which gives a much better knowledge base of just emergency services leadership and management. He's saying it costs about $1,000 to start that program and do that, because he's been through it. So that,
1,000 would suffice?
1,000 would get me started on that program, which is of those the most important.
There we go.
Okay,
We go from 4 to 1.
Ed and Dean, you want to go 1,000?
Yes.
Ed, 1,000?
Yeah.
Rick?
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to take that to 1,000, Tom.
The next item I have there is the Guardian tracking software. These are all piddling amounts. I include these things. Guardian tracking is a tool that they use to recognize good jobs and not so good jobs. It's like a personnel recognition tool. And use it for attaboys, they can also use it for, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, we track discipline this way too. You can do counseling through it. It's an HR tool, basically.
HR tool.
We don't just use it, police department uses it extensively, and it tracks, early warning if there's employees that have issues. But it also, we're gonna expand it, to use it with EMS too. They've not used it in the past, but, we think it's important to, it really is a good aid.
My view on these type of things is we always say, well, let's let the technology compensate. There's some manpower here and there, and this is a technology item, and I think that anytime we have the opportunity to use those, I think we should enhance our abilities to use that.
So you're voting yes?
I would vote yes on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm voting yes. Tom?
Okay, mobile data charges, that was a new item that was put in the budget this year, in Dave's budget, in the public safety budget, to add, well, I don't know what they're called.
No, actually, that was wrong, though. I went back and looked at it today. It doesn't add 5 new devices. That's what we had in there. But actually, we went back and pulled the numbers on that, and that includes the Captain Worth's Bill Gates is now over UCD, and the director's phones at $480 a year for the phone plus that's the AT&T $39.99 a month. So the new piece is just adding a modem that we had put in. We purchased the modem that's installed so it's the data for PS1 and PS2, which is the two public safety vehicles. So it really actually is only an increase of $1,440 versus $480 last year. So it really is not a $2,400 increase. I didn't catch that before I was looking over this today. So it actually is only a $1,440.
The question is, have we always paid these charges, or is this something new?
No, we've always paid the three, we've always paid the 2 directors' phones, Captain's Worth and my phone. But Bill Yeagley's is a new addition because he's moved over from CD. So that's new. And the 2 modems for the 2 cars, we've always paid them, but they were not modem fees on first instance. So essentially, it's, the bill, it's 3 new, but it's the PS1, PS2, which is 2.
Yep.
Thank you, Carol. I thought we were on radio for a second. Yeah, we are. I guess yes.
So we're talking about $1,400, not $2,400?
It was 2,400, but it was 1440.
Oh, I got you.
5 devices, but.
Yep, I'm good.
It's not 5 new.
Got it? Yeah.
2,400 is the number.
We're good.
Ted?
Yes.
Okay, I am too. Tom?
Dropping down to salary, new engineer. We had, Dan Flynn is going to be retiring in 2021. And we were planning on bringing a new engineer on at the beginning of the Q4 of 2020 to give that person 6 months, 6 months training before Dan left. But we can cut that back, bring the person on at the
last year, this was part of the succession plan that we asked you to do. I mean,
Correct.
seems like it would fall in line with having that person get some standard, on-site knowledge. I mean, what do you think, Dan?
Tom, today, next year when we do the budget, it'll be down to 2 weeks.
What if you decide to change your mind?
Deal with that next year.
So what are we making that number, or not, or we're suggesting we exclude it for this budget?
And not actually bring the person on
Yeah,
with Dan
yeah,
at the end of
yeah,
the next year, which I think,
So that would be a cut then, we're saying maybe that'd be a cut.
so in the beginning of 21, Dan's not gonna be here, what, I mean, the guy.
No, he'll be here at the beginning of 21, leaving in April or May, I think.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have.
So
this-
there'll be time with the new person.
Yeah, 3 months instead
Oh.
of 6 months.
Yeah, okay, I was unaware of that. I would
Dan,
be,
you didn't have that much time, did you?
So,
It wasn't.
I would be in favor then of cutting it if, that's the case. I didn't realize that,
you were considering this a 6-month run-in
Yes.
period?
Correct.
And if we take it to 3 months, that would go to 10,000?
No, it
no.
would, no,
It'd
it
be no
would be a
thousand.
$20,000 cut for for not bringing the person in the fourth quarter of 2020.
But I think Dan has enough institutional knowledge that we need some time with the new hire.
And we'll have 3 months
It'll be 3 months.
with the new hire. We'll have January, February, March.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Likewise. So
Yep.
this 20,000 goes away.
Is that true, Tom? The
Yes.
20,000 goes away?
That's correct.
Carolyn?
Yep.
Okay. Dean?
Yes.
Yep.
Pitt?
Good.
All right, it's unanimous. But it's with regrets that you're leaving, Dan.
Yes.
Well,
Oh,
that
he
goes-
didn't tell you he's gonna stay on, you know,
Goes without
he's
saying.
just pretending.
We'll use Dan as a consulting engineer, that would save us some money, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's a thought.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Last item is part-time office personnel for codes community and economic development. There's a new item added in there. It's a contingency, just in case we need somebody for, we've had to hire people in that department before to sort of work for folks that were off and extended leaves and things like that.
Okay, so you're recommending that we vote yes to keep it.
I'll let Erin recommend it. She asked for it.
How about that part-time laborer up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, something for him to do.
So-
Or-
We have a lot of plans that are on paper and we're working on digitizing them. So in time, what we have found is our staff gets busy doing the actual day-to-day work and the plans just sit and we're always like, oh yeah, we're gonna get to that when it slows down. And then it doesn't actually happen. So we have been bringing in part-time help, usually a college student or something that has worked a couple hours in the summer or a couple hours a week in the summer to help us digitize plans, help us do our filing, that kind of thing. So since we have been able to do that the last several years, I put it in the budget for this year. However, we also have had, to Tony's chagrin, several people on light duty, so we've been able to use them. So I think we can probably continue to use other staff from other departments that are on light duty to get by without this
So we can
for
cut it.
next year.
So we can cut it.
And if you need it, you, I mean, I
We'll
would
find
imagine
it.
you
Malone will
find some
pay for it.
funds.
One of the reasons we were able to find it in the past is because other people left. So then we were short-staffed. So then we just brought somebody in to kind of do that to get us by. So we found the money that way.
Gotcha.
So it was just getting us by.
Wow.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Tom,
Okay?
Tom,
Yeah.
would you go up to, what is it,
I'm sorry?
412, 148? What's the figure that you have up there? I can't.
$75,000.
Okay, we made that 75.
And that, Ped, that keeps the 12-hour shifts.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to be here all night.
Okay, so, Pat, you're okay with cutting this $2,000?
Yeah,
Yep,
Dean?
yes.
I'm okay with cutting it. Rick?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yep.
You're saying we're keeping it or cutting it?
Cutting it.
Cutting it.
Cutting it.
That was brutal.
All right, going over to attachment 3, these are all public safety items. These were things that originally had been submitted with the budget that we kind of backed out. And I can save a lot of time by suggesting that all these things that I have marked one-time expense, all those things that, these 5 things I have marked one-time expense, we can treat these like the other one-time expenses and add them to the fund balance, what we're using fund
Oh, yeah,
balance for.
yeah.
It doesn't add a whole lot of money, so. So if you agree to purchase these things, that's where they can come from, so. Starting at the top, lieutenant's salary, this was a promotion from a sergeant to a lieutenant, to have 2 lieutenants instead of a lieutenant and sergeant. And Dave can explain this, or Leon can explain it, but essentially the sergeant is doing lieutenant's work now. This would just simply be an increase in the salary. This would be the difference in salary between a lieutenant and a sergeant, I think, for half a year.
Roughly, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
okay.
it would really be less than that.
Right, with, Greg's in the same position Dan's gonna be in, Greg's in.
At 12 months.
Oh, at 12?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So,
April 2021.
good. So, it was actually to go back to what we used to have. The reason that we have a sergeant and lieutenant was because when we went to 12-hour shifts, we only had X amount of dollars in the budget. So to fund the additional corporal's position, Leon and I had some discussions, and we moved that money into a sergeant's position instead of promoting another lieutenant when Leon moved to the captain's position, and we hired that. So essentially what we're doing here is we're going back to we found that Sergeant, that Doug's basically been doing a whole lot of administrative things, and we'd be better served with him having that, back to that structure where there's 2 lieutenants. So it's a nominal amount of money in terms of $2,400 roughly a year to do that.
Do it?
Top, okay. Carolyn, you're okay with this?
I'm okay with it.
Dean?
Yes.
Yes,
Ped?
yes.
And I am. Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Next item is a rear parking lot camera for out back on the police side. You guys can explain that.
That was part of, and again, this isn't anything we have our heart and soul into. This was part of Scott Emerson coming to us and saying that they're expanding the building camera system, and the places that we do not have cameras are to the exterior of the building currently. We have, front, we have interior, but it basically would provide and that's what, there's another one down there further as well, under 415. It would provide a rear-mounted exterior camera that would cover the fenced-in area, and then would also cover where fire service parks all their vehicles. So that's the 2. But again, this isn't anything I don't think we have our hearts and souls into, so if the board would want to eliminate one or both of these. If we eliminated one, it would probably be the one to eliminate would be the police side, since it's a fenced enclosure.
Which one?
The fenced enclosure camera.
Okay.
The one on the fire side, since those vehicles sit out there, especially overnight with nobody around them, if volunteers have come in, their vehicles are essentially not under camera, not protected by that.
So would that be the rear parking lot or the security cameras? There are 2 things listed. I'm just trying to,
I'm not, the one is under 415, so.
One's under 410, 260, and the other one's under
Yeah,
415.
so I think the 415 is the one that would be on the volunteer side. The 410 would be on the police side.
would these be monitored in some way?
Now they're just recorded, so if there's an issue, we have a recording of the fact that somebody did something stupid to one of the vehicles out back.
So part of it is the assets that we have. If they're gonna be tampered with, it'd be nice to know that somebody did.
Right.
So, and the security cameras would cover personnel that would be coming in and out of the building?
Right.
So if this is gonna come out of fund balance, I think those are pretty serious.
And they're one-time expenses.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
too.
if they're gonna come out of fund balance, I would say that we do, this is important from the standpoint of our employees and our assets. I would say keep them in.
I agree. Carolyn?
Mm-hmm.
Dean? Ped?
No problem.
Okay. On both the cameras, correct?
That's what I was
Right.
thinking.
Okay. The 415 and the 410, okay. Tom?
Yeah, okay, the license plate reader, I mean, we had plenty of discussion on that. I don't know, we need more.
This is maintenance on that,
That's a
correct?
maintenance, yes.
Okay.
But if we
Every-
don't maintain it, it falls off. I mean,
Goes
If you want to
we-
keep a license plate reader, you gotta pay this.
Ped? Yes?
And you're
No.
already saying, so you're already saying we have a huge investment anyway now, right? 20,000? Is that about?
The cameras were free to us.
Oh, okay.
But they will go away. We have a $6,000 server.
Gotcha.
On my right, are both you guys okay with that item?
Yeah.
I mean, based on this spreadsheet, I think we have to be. It's taking care of things.
Right. Rick?
That's fine.
Carolyn? Yep. Okay. Tom?
Supervisor pay bonus, this is going over into EMS, was a recommendation to pay the supervisor an additional $4,000 for supervisory duties.
No.
So this is just a bump in the actual rate. It's not like we're just giving them a bonus, right?
But, yeah, it would be part of the rate,
Yeah, it's just they're
Right.
getting paid extra to have a supervisory role.
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, it's,
So it was to do quality assurance and the kind of things that were previously done when we had across the river ALS. They did all of those things. They had separate personnel. It's adding additional responsibility.
Right, so they're doing more
oh,
work
to give
than-
them supervisory pay.
Right.
Oh, I thought you meant to give them a bonus.
Yeah, it's listed
No.
as bonus, but that's why I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that. I didn't think it was a bonus. So they were actually doing more than the people they'd be supervising.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
We okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, supervisory pay,
Ed?
okay, yeah.
Dean?
Yes.
Okay. Tom?
Okay, adult ventilator.
This was one of the things that, there was a couple of items that were listed in the budget that we were gonna, basically, we would buy, it'd be nice to have, but by the same token, we were looking for, to move ahead with, essentially, what am I thinking about here, Tony? We were gonna do this for the
The grant.
grant for the
If the
paramedicine.
community paramedicine grant comes
Right,
through, this would
community
be
paramedicine, right.
set aside for that.
So and that's still, I guess, a decision the board would have to make as to whether or not they want us to apply for that grant. But if we would get that grant, there was a match. This was one of the items that we would not buy, and we'd utilize this money towards the match, if that grant was awarded, to move forward with the community paramedicine program.
Okay.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, essentially, we won't buy it unless we get a grant for it.
and this is just a match amount, roughly.
Oh, okay.
So is it possible on an item like this, I'm just throwing it out there, it's almost 5,000, that we would be able to, if the grant came, I mean, not necessarily budget for it, but then that we would,
Since it's a one-time thing, would that be a potential fund balance item? Were you going there, Dean? I don't know.
well, it looks like it is, or listed that way, so I'm wondering.
It
if
is.
we
Sorry,
would
yes,
need
it
to
is, one
budget-
time.
But
I
it-
apologize.
But it wouldn't come out of fund balance, it would come out of grant revenue.
Okay, but there's money there that, it's not part of the operating budget,
Correct.
really.
It's not part of the operating budget now,
Well-
and it doesn't sound like it's going to be unless you get offsetting revenue.
Yeah, okay.
Right, and if
I
we
think
don't
we
get-
should go for it. I think we should go for the grant, and then we,
No, sure.
if we get it, then we need to pay it, and we have to spend it. Yeah, are we on?
Yeah, I'm just saying from the standpoint, if we budget for it and we don't get the grant, that $4,900 doesn't come back.
No, it stays,
No, it goes into the fund balance.
right.
I mean, which we'll be taking out of anyway, so I guess.
Stays, but we don't have
So
to
it's a moot
spend it.
point.
Yeah, that's what I was getting.
So,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Just
All
took
right,
me
so-
some words to kind of have
That's
that come
okay,
back
it's
around.
getting,
Do we have this equipment now, Dave?
No, we do not.
So we're expanding our capabilities.
Yes, we could be. If we get the grant, we're moving into the community paramedicine area. If we don't get, because there's other things that are included as a part of that. An additional cardiac monitor would be part of the grant. There's a series of things that would add on that we don't then have to spend capital or tax money on because we're getting a grant. But there's a percentage that you have to apply to match the grant. It's not the full, it's not a 50-50, it's a smaller percentage, but we would need to be able to identify within the budget things that we say, we're not buying this, we're gonna use that money for the match. That's one of those items.
Okay. Okay, from what I'm hearing, everybody's in favor of this?
Yep.
Okay, we're in favor.
Day room seating is, this is upstairs in the day room next to the hallway entrance to EMS. There is a lounge, call it lounge day room. It's got some 11-year-old furniture in there, and the recommendation has been to, number one, replace the furniture with something more cleanable, and number two, to arrange that in sort of tier seating. It's like a theater sort of arrangement.
what's the, I'm oblivious. What's the significance of tiered seating?
It's actually not, it's not as though we have to install platforms, but there's a TV in the front of the room.
Oh, okay.
And so what it
All
does
right.
is, this is actually furniture that has
I get it.
a low area to the front, the next one's a little higher.
Well,
so
if it's for that standpoint, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
It's personal space instead of everybody crowding on couches together, which is
Right.
not always the best.
And to upgrade it all, we're gonna have some expense anyway to put new furniture in there, and I'm a complete advocate, so if we're gonna actually expand on, the live-in program and invite more volunteers to be comfortable here, I think and I spoke with, in fact, Commissioner Shin and I both at one time had an opportunity to speak with a couple of the public safety folks about that, if you recall, it was
I
at.
do.
Yep.
Yeah, I
And-
knew, I couldn't remember with whom it was. but
Yeah.
I now know, I now.
And I think this is the type of thing that, we have to make sure that we stay vigilant about with regard to the live-in program.
It's a yes for me.
Carolyn? in
Yeah.
favor?
Yes.
Can't
Ed?
have them up on top.
Ed?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous, Tom, go ahead.
This came, half-year PSO, that came out of the public safety ad hoc study. Hiring an additional PSO in the middle of the year, total cost $25,300. Suggesting that we hold off on that or postpone it. Same issue with the police officer, it's still gonna come back around. The reason this was included was it was covering some shifts, I think, in order so that we had somebody available for apparatus 24/7 essentially.
We were not, especially now we have a deployment to the military, so we were not covering. There's times where we do not have a PSO on 24/7. So this was going to compensate for that, and then the part-time position listed under it was to fill in the void for part-time. again, these were recommendations from the ad hoc, and so we had put them in the budget for consideration. It's back to the old problem. If you don't have a PSO to drive the live-ins, they don't get out. And then they're standing there all bunkered up and the engine's not rolling.
So this is an expense that's gonna come and hit us anyway.
I mean, the question is, do you wanna hire, are we hiring a full-time person, or do you wanna fill it in with part-time hours?
Oh, I see.
It's really adding another full-time person. Again, it's a half-year expense, but then the following year it becomes a full-year expense.
So did we consider hiring part-timers in this program?
Yeah, we did, actually, that was it was actually both things were in the original budget, a half-year part-time or full-time, and then also some part-time hours. The part-time hours were front-end loaded because it was gonna be easier to get part-timers on at the beginning of the year, you know, for that 6 months. Because we knew there was gonna be a period of time where you can't hire a full-timer. That takes advertising and everything else, so that's why, you know, wouldn't ever happen until halfway through the year. But the part-timers could theoretically be brought on a lot quicker. But this was actually looking at both.
I see.
What was the answer to the question? Did we include the pay increase for the PSOs?
That was, Tom, that was a question you said you had for Rick.
Oh, I deleted that, I got the question answered.
Put a line through that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a line out? Oh, good.
No, I appreciate you
That was a
answering
question of, a note I made to ask Rick if the recommended pay increase for the PSOs, which was to a minimum amount, was included in the 2020 budget.
So it's actually
It is.
in the budget?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
So what are we deciding then?
Draw a line through.
Yeah, I know, got that, but we still have to decide whether, so this is already in the budget then, Tom?
It is not in. the
It's
budget.
not, that's what I
No.
thought. Okay.
None of the things on
That's
this
what I
page.
thought.
are in the budget.
The increase
He'd
in,
be adding it back.
the
He'd be adding it.
recommended increase in pay from the ad hoc is in there for the PSOs. It's already
Yes,
in the
it's
budget,
in the-
but
yes,
this
that's
is
in the budget.
this is specifically hiring the new PSO,
This is hiring a 7th PSO,
and then the next one being the part-time
additional, part-time hours.
hours, right?
Okay.
So there's no scratching any, I mean, there's,
Getting rid of that question, the
Yes.
question's not relevant.
yes, there you go.
Okay.
Wow.
Are we adding this in, or are we leaving it out for 2020?
Dave, the ad hoc recommendation was to bring on the extra PSO?
Right, it was F 1.1 for both of these was the recommendation.
Go ahead, Frank.
Just to add to what Director Paul had said, basically, the 7th PSO is, in the police department's terms, the shift relief factor for vacation, sick leave, so on and so forth, and also with the deployment. To get us back to our regular strength, and then also have that additional one, because right now, people are taking off for hunting season, and we're actually gonna have an impact of probably no PSOs during the daytime. We're keeping the nighttime shift covered, but the daytime, we're probably not gonna cover, to be honest with you. It'll just be during the day.
Well, Captain, if part of this has to do with a deployment, when that person comes back from deployment, we would not need this. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct, but currently we have one shift that is one PSO during the daytime and one PSO in the evening.
Well, I'm in favor of this, what makes me in favor of it is unlike most of the time when we add a person, an individual, that never goes away. We will not need this extra person when the deployed employee comes back.
The one thing I would like to add is we have, with the one shift, we have one PSO during the daytime, one in the evening. When we have the additional PSO come back, we'll have a full complement of 2 during the day and 1 in the evening, but we still won't have anybody for the shift relief factor, especially in the evenings. That will be an issue. That's the one time that we're really trying to keep covered for the live-ins, basically, so that we have somebody in place.
So that has nothing to do with the deployment then? You're gonna want this person anyway? Isn't that a scheduling situation? You have enough people, you just don't, they don't wanna work the shift, or what?
Not enough people, that's the problem.
Pardon me?
There's not enough people.
Well, I think it's disingenuous to say, well, because of a deployment, we
Well,
wanna do this.
no, that was not, what I was saying was we have a deployment that's caused additional
Yeah.
openings. It's not that the deployment's gonna, when he's back from the Middle East, that it's gonna fix it.
Yeah, okay.
Does the,
Again, this- Go ahead.
does the ad hoc, I don't remember, call for any more, in the process of the next 5 years of PSOs?
One more.
It asks for another one, how far down the road?
I'd have to look.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
okay. Do you remember, Frank?
Might be 2
When
years.
the next PSO is?
After this one,
2022, sir.
that's in the ad hoc recommendation?
Yes.
So for the 2022 budget, gotcha.
So if we add this $9,000 to,
It's not the 9,
It's
it's
the
the 25,000.
25,300.
It's a half a year PSO expense, and that's everything, including salary and benefits?
Yeah, it's the one above the 9.
yeah,
Yeah.
I thought we were done with that.
No, it's
I mean, it's,
like chewing on a gumball.
right.
Again, for,
But Tom, wasn't it your recommendation to not do the 25.3?
Yeah, these are all not
Correct.
included, yeah.
And what would your rationale be for that?
it's well, a couple of things. One, that we already have, I mean, the budget is not, we're not paying for our expenses now with our current tax level. People are very expensive. And, yeah, an argument can be made for all these things, but how are you gonna fund it? People, like I said, people are expensive. This is one of the biggest expenses we have. A lot of the things on these two sheets they're nickel and dime. But honestly, we look back through the staff, and I couldn't make a recommendation on anybody here to cut without affecting services. So the only place you're really gonna save a lot of money in budget is by cutting people. So, rather than add another person, just one more person to the complement of the paid, full-time employees, before we start hiring, let's figure out how we're gonna pay for them. That's why I didn't have it included in the budget in the first place.
Yeah, this has been a great exercise, but the other shoe is gonna fall, and I'm not sure how far we've thought about, but, and at the
I'm not
risk
even
of
saying
being,
we don't need this person, I'm saying how are we gonna pay for it?
at the risk of saying no, I'm gonna say no.
I have a question with those. What's the relationship between the PSOs and the fire fund, though? Is that just a fire fund transfer that covers some of those?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it's listed in the general fund, though? Is that, is that like?
Two-thirds of it's in the general fund. I don't know, Rick, the number that's on there, is that taking the fire fund contribution into account?
No, I don't believe it does. No.
So that would be the grand
Of
total?
course, you've got a lot of problems there, too.
So the 25.3 isn't the whole number? I mean,
Well, it would be, some of that would come from the fire fund.
Okay.
As Rick said, there's an offsetting revenue, but then we have issues in the fire fund too, so.
Next year it goes to 50,000, 6.
Plus some percentage increase probably.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's gonna argue, well, on the police side, stats last year and then this year, it's one thing, and no offense at all to the public safety folks here, please don't take it that way, but I guess I need to be convinced that
you know, hiring this PSO now, or even hiring the two in the next 3 or 4 years, you know, is a critical. I mean, I believe that on the police side, that it's critical that we do it in the timing that we're planning on doing it.
Well, not to do their job, but if we're looking at beefing up the live-in program, the director and captain have pointed out that we have folks all ready to go, and they got their suits on, and the sirens are going, and there's nobody to drive the truck. And there's where the PSO comes in for that nighttime shift, and covering the change of shift, I guess.
Right. And then, it's overnight that we're having the biggest issues. And evenings are not bad, you know, you have volunteer drivers. But the fire department's experienced problems with the overnight.
I'm just wondering if there's a chance that we can modify our plan. I mean, the ad hoc was a great recommendation. I sat in on most of that stuff, and it's hard to deny it, any of it. But is there a compromise here on the part-time side? You know, looking now and down the road, because it's a lot more cost-effective for the township to hire part-time people, and you know, to Commissioner Shin's point and the manager's point, when we hire full-time people, I think we need to take it very, very serious, because they're here to stay, right?
And we don't have part-time PSOs, is that right?
We do not.
And I'm wondering if that can be part of the equation at all on this.
That's an interesting.
Because we're gonna be adding PSOs again, and I'm just wondering, maybe we should have that conversation. You know, and if there's ever a time and the live-in program kicks off and we get a great turnout out of that, and let's say something changes, it's a lot easier to cut back some part-time employees than it is the full-time employees. That's my understanding of how government works, you know? And I think where we can do that and there's some flexibility, we should consider it. That's all I'm saying.
So what are we gonna do with this?
Do you wanna?
I think eventually you're gonna have to hire a seventh one. The eighth one should probably be in an evaluative state, in 2022. But most likely gonna have to hire a seventh one sooner or later. That's my recommendation.
A full-timer is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And why is that? I guess just,
Really because of the evenings. The evenings are really an issue right now.
to get somebody part-time to be hired on is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
you know, our game plan is to bolster the live-in program as much as we can. And having that seventh person, making sure that we cover that evening shift, that if somebody calls off sick or whatever it may be, we can get somebody in there right away. That is key to
Are
having that seventh person.
our PSOs designated to either work day or evening, or do they work at all?
They have been rotating, but actually some of them have been, you know, for family reasons and also, because we're down one PSO, we've had some people actually staying on one shift, and then also some are on training still with some of the fire apparatus.
So when they were hired, they didn't realize that they may have to work an a regular rotation of evening shift?
Oh, no, they do that.
Okay. What are we gonna do, folks?
It's a tough one. It's, I mean,
I've already stated my
okay, so let me ask you this, Frank. I hate to split hairs here, but when you say eventually we'd have to hire one, would we get through 2020 and things would be relatively smooth? I mean,
I'll be totally honest with you, the discussions that we've had with the volunteer fire company in the last week or two, the crisis in volunteer fire services to the point that I really don't have a solid answer for you.
okay. And I appreciate that. I do, because I understand this is all weird territory for everybody.
I sympathize with the decision-making process here, I sympathize with the taxpayers. But the bottom line is we're not getting bodies, and we're not getting trained personnel in the apparatus at certain times of the day to provide a consistent service. And that's really the bottom line on it. And that's why I say about the seventh one, we really need to look at the seventh one, reevaluate
does come down to a public safety issue that's imminent to some degree. I got you.
There is no ands, ifs, or buts about it. You're gonna have to hire a part-time PSO, and it's gonna have to be now.
We don't have such a thing. We have to create a designation, don't we, Tom? We don't have a part-time
We don't
PSO.
have a job description.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any part-timers right now.
Because it's always been part-time in EMS, and I mean, it's always been a problem. It's always been a problem.
Well, do we need both of these items? The half-year PSO and the part-time PSO hours?
Yeah, what's that part-time PSO hours? We don't have part-time PSOs.
No, if it was gonna be in the budget, we would have created a job
Oh, I
description
see.
before the board.
Oh, okay.
We would have moved forward with part-time. We
It's
just
a
have never
request.
done it in the past.
Oh.
There's no sense doing it
Yeah, no,
without,
I agree with you.
without it being funded.
But
Absolutely.
if we increased, we're increasing the part-time PSO hours, is that right?
We were
Well,
just-
I'm
It's not
sorry.
an increase,
Just
we don't have.
announcing them.
We haven't, yeah, we're not increasing, we don't have any part-time PSO hours right now.
But are we giving additional hours to an existing PSO? Is that what that $9,000 item
No,
is?
that would be overtime.
They're trying to create a part-time PSO.
That'd
That's
be
it.
hiring part-time PSOs.
Right, and the part-time PSOs would have more driver chauffeur responsibility. They
Yeah.
would not have full responsibility of our PSOs, because they're here to drive apparatus and engage in fire,
Yeah.
portion of that.
I mean, if
Whereas
that's,
what we train our current PSOs as fire inspectors,
Yeah.
and there's a whole series of training evolutions that they.
see, if we went for that, if we designated evening part-time PSOs, then their job description would not, it would not necessarily include those things that you just mentioned.
The question is where, and I don't know the answer to this, but the question is where are you getting trained fire operators who can pump an engine, who I don't know what the pool, Frank may know, I don't know what the pool is for that, actually. We know we can get some, we know of some out there who may be interested, but whether or not that fills the need for what the full-time would, I don't know that.
But you said it earlier. It's never been really looked at, so,
Now, but we needed the money in there before we looked
yeah,
at it.
Go ahead.
Conception of the part-time program, there are several departments in the area that do have part-time driver, or they're not PSOs, they're part-time drivers, and that's primarily what we look at for the part-time PSOs to be a driver operator. Fairview Township, Monroe Township, those are
Carlisle.
two of the, and Carlisle has paid drivers. Primarily what we're looking at is maybe a pool of 3 or 4 part-timers that would be trained on the squad in the truck here. And they would then also be a pool that we could also draw off of for future full-timers if there's, an opening or something like that. We can actually vet that person sort of ahead of time. But that's sort of what our vision is for the part-time PSO program.
Yeah, because it's getting harder to get people not only to work evenings, but weekends, holidays. Nobody wants to do it. You've got to, so there's got to be a solution somewhere.
And in addition, the cost of the part-timer, it's, I believe it's $17.37 an hour versus the overtime rate for one of the PSOs to come in and cover a shift. That was the other thing.
Right.
But let me ask again, do we need both of these? The part-time and the 1/2-year full-time PSO?
Yes, with the current situation with the volunteer fire service and the way it's deteriorating, I would say yes. I would say we need to start a program with part-timers and also look at this, the 7th PSO, mid next year.
Oh, all due respect, they asked for it in the first place, so, I mean, that was kind of the answer I was expecting. Point is, we still gotta pay for it, and what about, so if the problem is overnight, why can't we schedule current full-time people that we have for the overnight shift, and then fill the daytime shift with part-timers. You know,
See, this is a management issue.
additional part-time people, if we can find them, to work during the day, and schedule our full-timers for the night shifts.
It's a management issue.
Yeah.
Currently, full-timers during the day do a lot of fire inspections and property maintenance, and the part-timers would not be trained in that realm as of yet.
Good answer.
Let me ask you this, would you settle right now for part-time PSOs?
No, not right now. But we need another PSO.
Okay, that's my question.
Captain, let's say that we have PSOs out doing a fire inspection and a call comes in. Is it obvious that they're gonna give up that inspection and go drive the truck?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so I want to try, you know, I fully respect the property maintenance, and John Eby and I got into this 12 years ago. I know how important that is. But we need, I agree with whoever said it, we need to cover that nighttime shift. And if they can't be doing property inspections because they have to cover that shift, I think we're really, you know, gnashing of teeth here. That's to me, no offense, but that's a management issue.
And that was one of my concerns as well, when we started talking about the property maintenance, and we were looking at the PSOs to, you know, to be out there doing it. Now, I understood early on in the budget discussions, a month ago or so or more, that it wasn't gonna be a pull, you know, but, I mean, I think it is. And if you look at the timing of when we need the coverage, you know, the daytime is when the inspections are gonna be done, and the property maintenance. I'm not saying that we don't do the property maintenance, I'm just saying, are we?
It's a shift in priority.
Yes, are our priorities straight, you know, because we're talking about hiring people, you know, and people's our biggest expense in the township, and, you know, I mean.
20 minutes ago, I said, at the risk of saying no, I said no on this. I don't know if we can come up with some consensus at this point.
So in other words, you're saying you would rather them sit around in the evening twiddling their thumbs rather than doing nothing? There's got to be something versatile here.
It's kind of like a math problem too. We're covering 24/7 with what's called the assignment availability factor. That's how many positions does it take to cover 24/7? And that factor is usually 1.65 or 7, something. I don't know what it actually is for this. So we have 6 currently, even if we were at full complement 6. But it's really difficult with vacation and sick and everything else to cover 24/7 that way. So, and I don't know if we would get enough part-timers, whether it's 3 or what it is. We ran into that problem with EMS, getting part-timers to cover shifts. So, I don't know. That's why the recommendation, and we talked about this for a long time in the ad hoc, and that's why they came back with a recommendation to have the full-time PSO and then supplement those assignability factor days with the part-timers. And they're trained, they're still trained at the same level as in terms of operators of fire equipment. But they're still everything else that goes with that. But at the same token, we don't have to train them as fire inspectors. We don't have to train them to do property maintenance. So they're dedicated at that point, and it's gonna be a lot easier to get them to do that in those evening hours if they're a part-timer.
Well, there's where the key is, though. During the day, they do property maintenance and things like that. But in the evening, then everybody's gonna say, well, what are they doing in the evening? You know, if they can't be out doing, you know, inspections and things like that, then they're gonna, you know, what are they gonna be doing in the evenings?
Waiting for fire alarm to go off. I mean, isn't that what fire people do? Who
With
are
a
full-time?
PSO?
There's other things
Well,
that they're gonna be programmed to do, you know, plans, and there's a series of other activities that Frank can assign them to do as well.
Yeah, they're doing pre-planning, they're doing training, also working with the training program in the evening, doing station duty, basically certain cleaning assignments in the evening that are much easier to be done in the evening versus the daytime. And also they're here with the livings. That's the biggest thing.
We had 3 commissioners sitting on the ad hoc committee. Was there ever any
Either included or
concern or
excluded,
question as to
and-
how all the recommendations were gonna be funded?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there was about halfway through, we brought the finance component in to it.
So you're not surprised that all this is folding?
Well, they didn't tell us dollar for dollar what everything was gonna cost, and nor did the recommendation get exposed till probably 3/4 of the way through the process. So it's hard to nail this stuff down, what the dollars were gonna be. I mean, frankly, when the final report came in and then the budget came out for it all, I was shocked.
Can we decide on something here?
We have to. Frank, you say that the part-time guy, even when he's on overnight duty, will be doing some maintenance?
They'll do what they are capable of doing, what they've been trained to do, as it relates to the apparatus and maintenance of the station. They might not have, they would probably not have the other more in-depth assigned, duties that a PSO would have. Another thing that I think is helpful concerning the part-time PSO program is that, that would be used in the assessment of hiring the 8th PSO. If the part-time program is successful, we could probably forego the 8th PSO, maybe even longer if we have a successful part-time program. But at this time, if we don't try it, we won't know. That's sort of where we're at.
And I guess I'm wondering, is it possible to try, part-time? And if that doesn't work, then we evaluate that and say, we have to go with a 7th. I'm just wondering.
So you're suggesting, Dean, that we say no on Ford 15,
Sorry, excuse me.
Ford 15-132 with the idea that we're going to float the balloon of the part-time PSO program. And if it doesn't work out, then we fall back and have to go with
We have to immediately go to a full-time person.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth a, I mean,
Oh,
maybe, I don't know
was
if
thinking
it's
that
worth.
too, but I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be worth a try. It just, once again, we go back to, and you brought it up, Commissioner Shin, months ago, and it's brought up again tonight. Once we hire full-time people, and the expense of having part-timers, and if they can do the job, I mean, you guys are the professionals. I guess
I think we
don't know that
try
I'm
it.
qualified to make that decision, to be honest with you.
I would ask that if that's the direction the board is going, that the $9,000 maybe need to be a little more, because
Make a suggestion.
without looking at numbers and schedule,
One,
I don't know.
I'm saying that the equivalent to making sure that we get a full-time, the coverage. I'm not necessarily even competing with saying anything different than what the numbers are here. I'm just saying, is it worth a shot looking at part-time?
So
I think it
rather
is.
than rather than 1/2-year PSO at 25.3, we leave the numbers there, but make them part-time numbers. Is that
Try
what
it.
you're saying?
I'm just wondering, is that something even the ad hoc would have considered if it was brought up in
It was
discussion?
not discussed, so I don't
You
know
know?
if they would have considered it or not.
Because I don't think the ad hoc, the folks that were all discussing this also, have the
Well, it's
knowledge.
not getting anywhere
of
going
what
back and
it
forth
means to
about it.
hire a full-timer versus having part-timers, you know?
No, not really. We're talking about, more part-time hours instead.
Just an idea.
No, I don't think it's a bad idea at all. I could
So,
support that.
Is this something that we can come back to on, like, at the next meeting, and maybe you guys can talk it through and come back and say, it's not gonna work?
When we talk about the fire fund and the plan that Rick and I have put together for that, it'd be a good time to revisit it. Because again, this will be partially funded by that. Sure,
For 10 o'clock, we're gonna get to the fire.
Okay.
so,
So, Dean, are you saying that you want to delay a decision on this?
I-
Or do you want to go ahead and budget the 25.3 and try not to spend it and immediately in 2020 hire a part-time PSO?
I would be in favor of, actually, if we have to make a decision on the numbers, I would be in favor of budgeting it. I would just also like to give some direction maybe just look at it, at the program, going in head first with part-time and saying, okay, well, if that doesn't work, then we will move with the full-time later. And again, maybe I'm not qualified to
We've got,
make
we've
that
got the
decision.
1/2-year PSO budgeted, but we don't spend it unless we have to.
Or we make that part-time money, as opposed to looking at a
What I'm saying is,
half-year, full-time person.
is that we would budget it and then give direction here in earnest. I think our folks will come back to us and
You're budgeting
say,
both as part-time money? You budgeted, I'm asking a
yeah,
question. The 25,300 and the 9?
Well, you
both as
may
part-time?
not need the 9 if you're going for 25,300. You've got that kind of money in there for part-time people. Because that doesn't have
I don't
the.
know what the math is.
No, I agree, but is that the concept at least you would think?
Yes,
Okay.
that we would budget the funds, but we would at least maybe look at coming back with, oh, well, this could work.
If we're gonna, if the manager's suggesting we're gonna have to talk fire at someplace other than tonight.
Unless you want to be here for
Exactly.
midnight.
Yeah.
Could we look at schedule and apply dollars to schedule and come back at that session and talk about
I
that?
think it'd be worthwhile.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if in the end, we have to hire the 7th PSO with the possibility of hiring the 8th, I think we've done everything we could possibly do to make sure that it was necessary. That's all.
So we're tabling those two, is that a fair statement?
I believe it is. But we're asking the experts to come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Integrated response, that's an exercise at the mall for integrated between the different services, police, fire, EMS. It's only $1,200. It's, the only reason I included it on here was because it was new, something that wasn't in the budget before. It's a little, it's
Yes.
probably, it's important for our practice. So.
Yes.
Rick's voting yes. Carolyn?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous for integrated response, Tom.
First responder study. This would be a study that would take a look at how and where our resources are deployed. And Dave, you can fill in the gaps on that.
Is this the consultant to
Yes.
tell us where we should have stations?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Can't we do it, we can't do without that, I don't think.
And we know where we need to have stations.
Not really.
We don't?
We do, but we don't.
Anecdotally, we might, but we
Yeah,
don't.
we do, but we don't.
When we were talking about this in the ad hoc, I'm surprised it came in at that, as low as it did. I thought it was gonna be a big
Well,
one.
I had last budget year, when I said we need to move this forward, I had quotes as high as $40,000+.
That's where I was thinking.
So, but we found another consultant that was considerably less, that is.
Well, as I understand it, this guy, the guy who responded is not a full-time consultant in this
No.
regard.
Correct.
He works in the fire
He
service.
works in the field, yes. I mean, he works in the fire service. He's actually, who we have looked at, and I got some tentative numbers from, is actually doing another consulting study locally.
On this next one, Mr. President, could we find something that we could actually cut that won't hurt us real bad?
Could we combine two in one here? Could the first responder study person, the consultant, also look into whatever about the volunteer recruitment?
I mean, it's, to me, this is marketing stuff that you.
I don't think that would be the same person.
And it's the-
What is volunteer
You're
recruitment?
going to,
consist of?
That's actually, in fact, we met with a gentleman that, you know, he is kind of a consultant, but he does a lot of marketing kinds of
Yeah.
things, yes.
yeah.
But that's, so it's to pay those kind of fees for somebody to come in. It's also for the, you know, the banners and the kind of things that we utilize to attract
What-
volunteers.
I know Captain Worth goes to there's a careers, West Shore School District does a career day for the middle
Right.
school students, and we have a presence there. In all honesty, for almost $6,000, we can do it without that, I think.
Well, this gentleman that we talked to, he is marketing and also multimedia, and that is something that we've been looking at for, you know, the volunteer fire service to get our presence out there, especially on social media. So, his name's Jeff, Ferguson. And, he really has a pretty decent program that he helped save his department, from almost closure, to be honest with you. So, I think we do need help as it relates to, a marketing expert on that, volunteer.
And for those of you who sat through and endured through the whole ad hoc, we know that and we have this conversation all the time, and chiefs could tell you, if we don't solve the recruitment problem, we're gonna be back here in 2-3 years, and you think 6 PSOs or 7 PSOs is gonna be the solution? If you can't get apparatus out, we have a whole nother problem. So we're trying the best we can to develop this whole recruitment piece so we can use volunteers. And this is just one more piece that we put in order to try to achieve that.
Is this a consultant? Like a marketing consultant
Sounds like
that gets this lump sum? Or is it just like pieces, like advertising?
$4,400 for materials, banners, table sheet, backdrop for fire recruitment and retention program, plus an additional $1,700 for support materials for public safety awareness and education.
So if we're gonna go out to events, that
Mhm.
you're paying for the POP type of material?
He also addresses providing guidance as it relates to the entire process of onboarding somebody into the organization. We're doing some things right now, but we
Okay.
need to do some other things, and he provides the entire program and coaches us on how to do that.
Okay. Will any of this carry over to the Lisburn Fire Company?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It will include the Lisbon Fire Company.
Okay. Good.
Did we happen to miss the ice machine, or did I just miss it?
No, we
That's
did
in,
not.
that's in the fire fund. We're not talking about that yet.
Oh. Because I know we went down that page, and I'm like,
We're starting
uh-oh.
the fire fund at midnight.
Oh, we're doing that at midnight? All right.
Rick,
Can we take up a collection for an ice machine, please?
Rick,
All right, before we get off track here too far, what do we want to do with this volunteer recruitment? Carolyn, do you want to vote yes or no?
I'm going to vote no.
Rick,
I'm a no.
a no?
I'm a no.
I'm a yes on it.
Ped,
I'm a no,
a no?
a no.
Actually, I think it's worth a try, and I realize I'm throwing my vote away, but I would vote yes.
Okay, I'll change mine. If you're going to go yes, I'll change.
Nothing like definite.
Okay, we have 3 yeses, so we want to do that, Tom.
Is that you say is that a one-time cost or an ongoing cost?
Should be one.
Yeah, it'll pretty much, for some of this stuff, it'll be a one-time cost.
It will be less.
It isn't like you're gonna pay the consultant every single year. I mean, if he develops a program, you'll use his material. Not to say there won't be costs in the future, but it really is not it's not an ongoing, like a maintenance fee.
We have to do the fire fund.
One-time startup costs. Okay. And what did you decide about the first responder study?
5-0 to keep.
I must have fell asleep. All right, so to wrap this up,
Did we get fire fund
No.
materials?
I'm sorry?
Did we get fire fund materials that?
The budget, just the budget itself, but Rick and I have been working on some scenarios that would involve a fire tax increase plus a transfer from the general fund. We'll offer up about 5 scenarios. It's gonna take a little while to go through, so I
Okay.
don't know if you wanna tackle that tonight or,
President wants to.
The president does.
What, the fire fund stuff?
yes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Where is it that we have that?
All right,
Oh, the small print,
let me run through.
is that what we're considering?
He has it right up in here.
Was it right? What did I miss? Oh, no, I have it, thank you.
Sure,
I have
the
it,
ones that
Tom.
she gave me were,
Which one is it?
I have it. We talked
It
about this.
is this one right here.
Yeah, okay. I got it.
Sorry, it'd be another fund, right?
well, let me wrap up this general fund right now. I'll kind of tell you where you're at. Right now, with the things that we've talked about, not including the PSO, you're looking at about another, $22,600
To be added
that
to
would
the
be
budget.
that would be paid out of the fund balance.
Oh,
Well, that's
That
the-
would give us to,
That's, that's the one-time costs.
oh,
But you're also adding 13,077.
well, the one-time expense items are 22.6, is that what you're saying?
That was another $22,600 from the items that we just went through on
Oh,
attachment 3.
not just the one-time expenses, but all these that we've looked at. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry?
22.6 from everything on there,
22.6 is everything on attachment 3 that you said to include.
Okay.
It's a one-time cost.
okay, but not just the ones that say one-time expense.
Yes.
Okay.
We add that to the other one-time expenses and,
Yeah, got it.
and then, of course, the other problem is we're looking at least $114,000 worth of additional operating costs
From the other sheet,
from sheets 2 and 3.
yeah, 114 you said.
So if you're taking out the one-time expense items, what kind of deficit does that leave us with in the general fund, or in the regular, general budget? Yeah, the general fund budget.
650,000.
Yeah.
Plus, there's another $114,000 worth of operating costs that haven't been accounted for. So let me run through some quick numbers for you to kind of, should be in your, the information I handed out to you. So our current millage rate now is 1.99. That's just in the general fund. And in the interest of time, I'll drop down here and just tell you, the additional millage, if you were to go with a general fund millage, this column here tells you that for every 1/10 of a mill, how much revenue that would bring into the general fund and how much it would affect the average household. The average household assessment in the township is $188,715. The average assessment would be $375.54. That's just general fund. We add all of our millages together, which would be general fund, fire services, and debt service, $572 on an average assessed home. So
That's added, that would be additional.
this amount here, if you were to choose one of these numbers, it would be, this column here would be the additional amount.
That's in addition to raising the fire fund if we add the
Correct.
expenditures into it,
Yes,
excluding the one-time items,
yes.
right? And
What
you're,
was that $572 you had just a second ago?
Now that's That's all of our 3 tax millages added together. We have a general fund assessment of 1.99 mils. We have fire services assessment of 0.63 mils. And debt service of, I think it's 0.41.
All right, so 572 is the assessed value,
So 572 is the tax bill.
tax
Tax
bill.
bill
Okay, that's
on
what
an
it is now.
average-
Is that what it is now?
Correct. On
Just
an
the
average,
township's portion.
on an
Oh,
average
yeah, yeah.
assessed home. That's on a home that's assessed at 188,715.
Okay. All right.
We have a lot of homes in the township that are assessed higher than that. But then we have a lot that are assessed lower than that.
And where in that breakdown with the millage and revenue, additional revenue would get us somewhere between the 0.3 and 0.4? Is that right? If we're,
We look at about 0.4.
so, yeah. So you're saying even with the cuts that we, we made cuts and then we added stuff?
Yeah, we haven't made.
You make a
Yeah.
whole lot of cuts.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
So
I think
we're still looking at
total cuts-
650,
Total cuts for about $110,000.
and we're still looking at about $650,000 deficit, right?
Well, yeah, that'll cover the deficit, 24 mils.
No, I'm saying, right now, we're looking
Yeah.
at 650.
572.
Of course, you really need to take a longer range plan. That's just gonna cover you for next year.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying, you don't have plans in place to deal with these types of costs. You know, we need a little bit more concrete direction, I think, to put that together. But if you wanna go year by year, I mean, it's a little bit, it's more expensive for the taxpayers, but you can do that.
When you say more expensive, how much is more expensive? I mean, some,
Well, that depends where you end up with.
But I have to say, Rick, I thought you were not recommending the one time. Let's do it now, well. I had your memo here 45 minutes ago.
No, that's right. My recommendation, and I'm just looking at it from a finance perspective, is to deal with fire this year and deal with the other 2 items in the future.
So would your recommendation be to fill the $650,000 gap this year with
Well, no,
additional
I think
fund
we're
balance?
past my recommendation. I mean, and that's fine. I mean,
No, I'm at-
you're going in a different direction, and, I mean, that's fine, you know. Okay.
The other 2 items that you're talking about, Rick, what are those 2 items?
Well, we have a 5-year capital plan, okay? That's fine for next year, but then there's the remaining 4 years that have a lot more projects in them than we have money for. So we need to resolve that. I mean, a lot of that's a staff issue. And then we have the tax part, as far as what type of tax increase do we do and when to keep it at an absolute minimum. And for that, you need more than just 1 year's pieces. I mean, there's things you added in here that I would have never guessed you added in. And there may be more of those. So what are the costs gonna be in the upcoming years? I mean, it's one thing, it's not too hard to do when your service levels and your costs remain the same, like they have for a long, long time. They've remained basically the same. There's been some changes here and there, but now you're looking at a major change in service levels, requiring a whole lot more money. And that's fine, but how is that gonna be structured? When are these costs gonna come in? And when are you gonna need the money? Okay, so we've got a handle, I guess, on next year's part, but what are you gonna do in the 2021 budget? And the 2022 budget relating to these service increases that you wanna do? I mean, when we have that component, we can tailor a tax plan that would be, like I said, the absolute minimum, because we would do it at the right time and we'd do it at the least amount we'd have to. Rather than do it incrementally, which is, you don't have the advantage of any planning or any savings or any strategic financing in there.
So again, for this year then, I guess if that was the case and we tackled the financing of everything, or the revenue portion starting next year, with just the overall increased cost of doing business in the township, it sounds is what it's gonna be if we wanna have a certain level of service. And not just with public safety, by the way, but we probably don't wanna compromise public works service levels and our parks and recs and stuff like that either, right? I mean, that's an assumption here, cause we're not talking about those items. And I don't want our services to be compromised, so I guess if we're gonna tackle it next year, are you suggesting for this year, the $650,000 that we would backfill that with additional fund balance? An additional draw from the fund balance? Cause it sounds like if we did nothing more tonight, we're gonna still wind up with a $650 deficit that has to come from someplace if we don't raise taxes.
It's gonna come from, it's gonna come from fund balance. The danger in that is some of those things are one-time expenses, but some of them aren't.
Right, and
Some of them
you
are
made that clear
recurring
in the
costs,
memo, and we get that, but we should talk about it.
Well, there'll be new one-time expenses.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of a semantics. The fact is that those one-time costs go away and more one-time costs will come in next year. It's that way every year.
Right.
Only now there's even more coming in than ever before. More than we're used to dealing with. I mean, we have long-term options. Like we know when it comes time to do the ladder truck, we're gonna have to float a bond. So we can time things accordingly as far as capital things to coincide with that. I mean, there's several things we can do. But all I'm saying is put together the plan first and then spend it, is all I'm saying.
I think a lot of the plan was determined by the ad hoc.
Okay, so you're then,
and-
but I
and-
never really heard the board say we want to adopt.
And what
all
we
these
have done
things.
tonight is we have taken the three major public safety services and we've done something with each of them.
If that's the marching orders, I mean, if that's what the board wants to do, then
I
then
mean,
it is clear.
we did some things for EMS, we did some things for the paramedics, we did some things for the police. We didn't do as much for fire, but we know that, we're gonna do some things for fire, I presume. And we know we're gonna have a new truck in the not too distant future, not this year, but probably quickly.
Okay, well then you're looking at the needs that were expressed in my memo, you know, I mean, it's a fairly sizable tax increase, but that's what I think I'm hearing you say? That all the ad hoc committee recommendations, you want to move forward with them in the
Well-
years they propose?
Well, first of all, it's my understanding, there's a lot of the recommendations that have already been sliced back. I mean, they just weren't added into these numbers, okay? And then, you know, we had a couple meetings where we had to decide on some items that were in there and some items that weren't, and some came up again tonight. I don't think anyone's saying that we go back and put everything in the ad hoc. I think that what the director came up with is probably the bare minimum, at least in their mind, that came out of the ad hoc, and that's where we're at. It sounds like we're at at least in this fund, $650,000 deficit for this year,
Okay.
and I'm assuming going forward, if we could project, you gave us a spreadsheet the last time, I'm assuming that's gonna be close to this. Maybe a little less, since a lot of things are out that were originally in the ad hoc. Suggestions?
Well, not much. But I did do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, so we
you've
saw
got,
it out,
You've got those numbers.
and that's probably was relatively
And you know what
close.
the requirements then to do that, to fund it all.
Right.
So is that what you want to do as
Well-
a board?
I mean, I'm so tired right now, I hate to say it, you know, but I don't know that we have much choice. I mean, I don't know what we should do at this moment, because, you know, don't think any of us wanna pull the plug on what seems to be the major cost drivers. And nor should we pull the plug, but I think that, I think we have to decide at this point, do we wanna try to backfill any of this with fund balance? And what effect that has on us, I guess, is the,
Yeah, I would factor
Question.
that in over, say, a 5-year period.
so you would work that,
Yeah, I wouldn't draw it all down and then hit the wall. Yeah, I would space that out. If I can come up, I mean, it'd be like 1.4 mils less whatever you draw down on fund balance.
Rick, if I'm reading your memo of 21 October, it's saying that to meet our 5-year plan, you were looking at 3.03 mils?
Well, 2.09, yeah.
2.09, what's the current combined rate is 3.03?
Well, that would be the addition.
Pardon me?
That would be the additional mills, 2.09, but,
So you're looking at 2.09 addition to what we are. what we
well,
have.
that's if you do it incrementally. If you do it now, it'd be 1.4 plus whatever we're gonna draw down in fund balance.
1.4 mils would carry us for the
Addition.
5 years?
Yes, an additional 1.4 mil.
And you're showing up there, okay, so 1.4, we would be adding 188.72 and 75.49, is that right? In the way of average household?
Yeah, math would work out to be that.
if I can add, that's just this fund.
No,
Do we-
that's everything. That would include fire and everything. So no, it wouldn't all be general fund, but it would include fire.
But we'd have to increase the fire fund by that much too. You're saying a
No,
total?
no, that'd be
it's
the
a-
total increase to the total mill. So some would be general fund, some of that would go to the general fund, some would
That's
go.
total out of pocket, Rick. 1.4 total out of pocket would be adding 75. Is that what you did it, Tom?
Yeah, it's the 264.20 would be
Okay.
the total additional tax burden on each, on the average household.
264.20. Yeah, it's a little over $20 a month.
And that would be over,
Over what you're currently paying, yes.
Yeah.
In addition.
And the current is what was it again, it's 572? Wrote it down.
Current total,
Yeah, 570.
572.
264.
But you're also not factoring in the,
Fire.
working down the fund balance in that, right?
Correct.
What's that, say that again, Gene?
There's not factoring in a work down of the fund balance, so that it could, if we decided that we wanted to keep X amount of dollars in the fund balance, let's just say hypothetically, $3 million, which the director's saying is the, kind of the comfortable number, and then another million for another project I heard, so $4 million in there.
You need 2.1 to keep 15%. Then, depending what type of recession you want to be prepared for, that'd be between $2 and $3 million. Then I keep $1 million for, just so you can do things like, for example, the pedestrian bridge, that's $750,000.
Right.
Even though we're gonna be reimbursed, you gotta have it to put it in
Well,
first so we can be
It was my
reimbursed.
understanding that was our cut,
So,
Oh,
so
okay.
we wouldn't be reimbursed.
All
right, so for round numbers, I guess in the millions, right? We're looking at 4, so if our fund balance is 7,
Yeah. You'd be
you know,
looking
is the
at-
board willing to work with that $3 million? I guess is
Looking
the
at
question.
really close to 7, but you could figure $2 million would cover you through a recession. So
Oh, okay, so
roll
maybe,
down to-
maybe, so then there could potentially be $4 million.
Well, there would be maybe $1 million you could roll down
Oh, is that it?
Well, if you want to be prepared for all those things,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Oh, you're saying the 3 million will be in addition to the,
1.2, or 2.1, yeah.
oh, okay.
That's a 46% increase in tax.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
I-
we haven't even talked about fire services yet.
So I was always under the impression that the 1.5, the 15% fund balance goal was to have the money there in case of a recession. You're saying in addition to that, you should have an additional $3 million in the event there's a recession?
For the worst recession. Yeah.
Okay, well, I totally misunderstood that when I
Yeah,
heard it.
no, the 15%, there's a lot of reasons for that. One is things that you just can't foresee. You know recessions are coming. It's also important for bond rating. I mean, a 15% fund balance will get you up to an A rating. You know, to get to a AAA, you need 30%. So it really depends. I mean, when we were rated last, we had more than 15%. So,
Mhm.
you know, it really depends what your goals are financially.
Well, I think we do it, and we recruit Chief Bonneville to sell the thing. Roll right off your tongue, Dick. You know, you gotta raise taxes, do it.
Um,
Well, we don't have to make that decision tonight, do we? What else do we want to cover? I feel like I'm
Well, let me,
stuck in the mud again.
Yep.
as long as we're here.
I have your fire budget memo. Is that what you were going to use, Tom? No, here comes another one.
Let me hand you out some cool things you can take home and look at. Whether you want, unless you want to go through each and every one of them tonight. The problem with the fire fund is not just a current year deficit, but it is not funded correctly to go forward. We have, fire fund is two parts. It's operating costs, and it's also apparatus replacement. The operating costs have increased dramatically, mostly due to our volunteer incentive program, the student tuition, the stipend and all that. And the apparatus replacement schedule is also inadequate because, number one, the numbers in the old apparatus replacement schedule we had were a little undercooked, I think, because of the price of apparatus has just skyrocketed because of steel and everything. Also, there was a new schedule that was presented with one piece in particular that was the next purchase. It's pretty expensive. In fact, all these things are pretty expensive. So when we looked down the road, there was just no way that the fire service fund's going to continue to operate with its current funding. So let me show you what we've been working on. And these, I have them up here, but also, and it looks like a lot of numbers, but I'm just going to show you the important ones. If we take a look at 2020, coming up next year, this is what the budget would look like with no tax increase. So what we did, Rick and I talked about splitting the fund into two halves. One for operating costs, the other one for capital replacement. What this particular thing would show you what the revenue would be with the current tax level, putting 95% of it in operating and 5% of it in capital. But down here, you can see, this also would require a $2 million infusion. It would basically be a transfer of fund balance from the general fund to the fire fund. Okay? You can see going forward, keeping with assuming a 5% increase in tax revenue and a 2.5% increase in expenditures, which we would suggest limiting. If future increases in the operating expenditures to 2.5%. This shows you what happens to the fund balance over the years. So we go, okay, on the operating side, you run into problems in 2022. That would be the soonest that you would need a tax increase in the fire fund if you followed this plan right here. You can see the capital side does pretty well all the way out until 2028. But that, again, it's $2 million being transferred from the general fund to the fire fund. Another option. This would bring a 0.15 mil tax increase in 2020, plus the $2 million transfer from the general fund. So you can see if we do that, the operating side is really, I mean, it's good all the way throughout. Same thing with the capital. On the capital side, maintains a healthy fund balance, but a couple of things to point out. These things in purple, these are the purchases. And you'll notice that it's not in the year that was on the original apparatus replacement schedule. So in order for this to work, everything has to be pushed back a year. So this thing right here, which I believe is it's an engine with a ladder on it. Is that right? This $1.2 million purchase. So the items in purple there, they're the purchases coming up. These items in blue right here, these are financing. So for this plan to work, it would require borrowing of $750,000 in 2023 and borrowing $2.5 million in 2025, mainly because you have back-to-back purchases, one for 1.6 million, one for 2 million. Might as well round it up to 2 million. But as long as you increase the tax millage by 0.15, you transfer this $2 million, which I'm not a big fan of, frankly, because I think we ought to keep it in the general fund. But at least the fund balance stays healthy. You can pay for everything going forward. Again, as long as you limit your operating cost increases to 2.5%. I don't know why I'm not fitting all that on the screen. Okay. The next option would be, I'm sorry? Yep. Okay, that's an estimate? We don't. Yeah, okay. All right. So it looks like even increasing that, and of course, I guess all these other numbers would probably be adjusted slightly upward since we're moving everything back a year. But even with that increase in price, it looks like the fund balance still stays pretty good, stays pretty healthy. So, again, you got the transfer, you got the financing here and here. I believe there's probably financing out in 2030.
Are we on the
too.
third sheet now, Tom, that you gave us?
You're on the second one. I went back
Still
to
on
the second one due to Dave's
Okay.
correction on this number here. Oops. So by adjusting that number on this first sheet, this is zero tax increase with a $2 million transfer. You run into deficit out here in years 2027 through 2030. Now we're on the third sheet. Again, this would entail a 0.26 mil tax increase this coming year, but no transfer from the general fund. So we'd be able to keep that $2 million in the general fund. By doing this, what happened? the operating side stays pretty healthy all the way out here till 2029.
And that's 0.5% tax increase.
0.5? No, 0.26.
You're saying the point two.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got it.
No, it's not a
Sorry,
percentage,
sorry.
yeah,
I got it.
it's actually the millage itself.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The .26 would then bring a deficit in '26,
Yes,
roughly?
right.
And the 2 million coming from the fund balance is off of the 7 million that we've been talking about, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But-
And that would, rather than, I'm just assuming if we did this, rather than just keep that, we would maybe use it in the general fund?
Well, we could use some of it for certain things, yes. I mean, again, Rick was talking about, we want to keep a certain balance in there for not only the 15%, which is the best management practice, but also a little bit extra for recessions, and if you want to, a little bit extra for taking advantage of things like pedestrian bridges. But this is why, this is kind of why I don't want to transfer the $2 million over. But if you transfer it over to the fire fund, you need less of a tax increase on the fire side. If you don't want to transfer, you need a little bit higher. 0.26 is the minimum amount that we calculated could get us out to at least this far. Actually, it took us out farther until I adjusted this number right here. But at least it shows you that you could get out to 2026 before, you had to do something. Actually, I believe, yeah, okay. So this is the combined, both the operating and capital down here. So the operating side is healthy all the way to 2029. The capital side runs into a little bit of trouble in 2026, so you'd have to figure out something else to do then. But then, the other important variable here is 75% of this tax revenue goes to the operating and 25% goes to capital. We can play with those numbers and make them, do different things. But if we go to this next slide here is with a 0.32 mil increase. That's a 50% increase in the current millage with no transfer from the general fund. 70% of the revenue going to operating and 30% going to capital. See what happens here is it stays healthy all the way out until 2028, but the capital side stays healthy throughout. I mean, it stays healthy, plenty of money to pay everything. The one thing you'll notice is that the financing here goes away. We don't have to borrow that $750,000 in 2023. I gotta change that number again. Did you say it was 1385?
Is this all assuming, because, a little bit ago, we assumed there's gonna be more one-time expenses. You've adjusted for that in these spreadsheets?
This is fire stuff. We don't really take one-time expenses into account here.
But Director Grove was saying that there's gonna be more one-time expenses that will come up down the road. Would
Well,
that also apply here?
Capital replacement items every year. Every year replacing cars. It's not the same car, obviously, but every year replacing cars.
Okay. So it's not like new stuff will come popping in?
No, and there's not that much, what we're talking about here in capital for the fire fund is almost exclusively apparatus.
Oh,
There's not gonna be that much, that's what we're planning for. So there's not a bunch of other things in here that would be considered capital acquisitions. In fact, most of the things that we're looking at, like for example, the ice machine, it's $4,000. That would be taken out of operating costs. That wouldn't even be a capital item. So, but it's a good time to bring that up. If you were to take, steps like this, you could easily add those things back in that I took out. But if you look at these deficits on the operating side, and you look at the surplus on the capital side, you have more than enough money to cover those. So there's nothing you would really need to do because the overall fund is still in the black by a good amount. So you just simply transfer a little bit of money from the capital side to the operating side, and you still got plenty of money in capital, and you cover your operating losses on the operating side. And then this last slide shows you the same scenario but moving 75% of the revenue into operating and only 25 into capital. And change this again.
And this talks about fire fund tax increase as well, right? This
Yeah,
last
that's,
one.
exactly. Again, when you get out here, by moving 5% more of the tax revenue over to operating, the operating fund stays healthy all the way to 2030. The capital side runs into a little bit of trouble in 2026, but if you look at the amount you have up here in operating, you have more than enough money to cover those losses. So, same thing in the next year. In fact, if you look at the total fund, it stays in the black throughout, so.
What's the purple again, Tom?
Purple is the expenditures. Those are purchases. This would be a purchase of, am I correct, on an engine with a ladder? Okay,
That's 1.25 mil,
yes.
Okay.
That's an engine with the ladder on it. This is, I believe is that the aerial? 2025? 1.6 million? I'm not sure whether, no, that's what numbers I got from Rick, but that's the aerial, and then over here in 2026, that's two pieces of apparatus, actually. It's an engine, I think, and another piece for Lisburn. And
Going
after
back
20
to a ladder truck, Dave, is that Back to the Future? Going back to a ladder truck, no, okay.
Yeah, it's a piece with a smaller wheelbase that gets in our tighter neighborhoods. Still gives us vertical, capabilities. That's kind of where we're at with the fire fund. Something needs to be done. It's not going to sustain anything going forward without an infusion of money, and that's either going to be.
So we're going to make purchases in 23, none in 24, purchase in 25 and 26.
Correct,
Is that what I'm reading?
yes. And then again in 30.
Yeah, then again, 30.
I won't be here. Rick,
Yeah, Rick will be here.
Rick will be here.
Rick says, I'll be here. Dave's got his hand up, Mr. President.
No, it was not.
I didn't hear what he said.
He said that the purchase dates up here was not what was presented in ad hoc, and I
Okay.
said, he's absolutely right. This is moving everything back a year.
Something's got to give. Was this what you wanted to cover as far as fire?
That's it. Plus any discussion you want to have.
How many more meetings do we have? Or, I mean,
Well,
when's
you have
our-
one more budget meeting advertised, December 2nd. You can always discuss it at your public meeting next Monday, too.
Yeah. I think in all fairness, I don't know about you, but it's got the point where, yeah, I'm starting to tank. And if we put it on the agenda, Mr. President, after we've had a chance to chew a little bit, then I think we'll have a whole lot better discussion of than trying to do it tonight. It's
That's
my humble
fine.
opinion.
Going back to our tax page here, I did throw this on here. These are the different, this would be the different fire millages with the additions that we covered on the other spreadsheet. So it's currently 0.63. If you were to increase it by 0.15, it goes up to a total of 0.78, 0.89, 0.95. So.
Well, 46% increase in taxes is painful.
Quite a bit.
I'm gonna get a part-time job, just to live here.
So I didn't mean to depress anybody, but with the programs and services that we're funding right now, it's not going to be covered with current tax levels. We can talk about, decreasing service levels if you want, but,
That has a, what's the word I want to use? Heard the word nefarious, but I'm not sure what that means.
pejorative?
Yeah, it's kind of hangs out there. You know, what does that really mean? And to keep it simple for me at 10:35 at night, there was a time when you made a phone call into to any public place and a lovely voice on the other end said X, Y, Z, whatever, how may I help you? Now, everybody hates them, but if you're looking for so-and-so, hit 1. If you're looking for such, hit 2. Nobody likes it. But what does maintaining service mean, and how can you afford to do that necessarily?
Sure, it means different things in different departments. We'd have to sit down with the departments and figure out what that means. For example, under a highway, it could mean doing away with certain services that we're doing right now. It could mean.
Tom, Pet
less-
and I think, lived through no longer having spring cleanup, and that was the end of the world. But now we do it. Now we do it with make a phone call and they'll come out and pick up that sofa or whatever it is. You know. So did we reduce service? Sort of.
Question is to what level? I mean,
We still do it, but we do it differently.
As I've said many times, the only way to significantly affect the budget is to cut people, because that's our 70% of our expenses. So if you cut people, you don't have the people there to perform certain things, so that's where you got to decide what you're going to do away with.
If I were to ask for a show of hands, how many people go to the grocery store to use the self-serve aisle? Yeah, those were jobs, you know, those were jobs. And for a long time, I stayed away from them because I thought, no, I'm not gonna do people out of work. So I don't know.
Mhm.
Might have to take a different paradigm, you know. I'm finished speech making, I apologize.
I mean, I think a lot, in the recent past decades, a lot of the cuts in services like that, or I guess we can call them efficiencies, but somehow we're getting, like Commissioner Shins, less service, is still coming with a cost increase. That's the issue. So that we're always gonna have the costs increasing, and so, I mean, we just have to get through this. That's it, and manage through it. Good luck, Rick. I am curious, though, to see how, let's say, starting next year or even in '21, with the more weighted tax increase, how that affects us. Because I'm assuming if we didn't start till next year, let's say, it's not going to be 2.3 mil or whatever that bigger number is, right? Yeah, yeah. So I am curious to know if we have options to, you know, delay a tax increase, let's say, keeping these service levels what we've decided. And if there are options, you know, is it next year or the following year or something like that?
Well, you certainly have options. I mean, the options for the absolute lowest tax burden is to do it as soon as you can.
Right.
Delaying it adds it in total in the long run.
Right. But you didn't seem too alarmed by coming up with a plan for this year to fund and then next year doing it, it seemed.
Oh, you can do whatever you want. You know, I just want to point out, like, the lowest burden option.
Right.
That's all. If you want to pick another one, that's fine too.
Just curious. That's all.
Are you ready to move out of the township, Rick?
No, I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. Well, then I think we're okay.
I mean, it's a lot of places you move, it's worse.
You should move to Harrisburg. Move to Harrisburg.
I mean, everybody's facing the fire crisis.
I want to thank staff for I know you guys worked, a couple of you anyway, worked hard over the weekend, and thank you.
Yeah, plowing snow.
You saying this was a snow job?
In one closing comment, Some of our officers came under fire late last week, Leon, and how are they doing?
All indications they're doing well. We set up a critical incident stress management debrief for them on Friday. It was attended, and that's confidential, whatever was said there is amongst them. It's to help just process the whole event. But we've talked with each of them several times since then, and they seem to be doing well.
And they were some of our youngest officers, weren't they?
2 days out of field training.
Wow.
And I spoke with Mayor Morrow again today, and he wanted me to send along, particularly to you, Captain Krenya. I think you talked to him. He wanted to say thank you, and they were very grateful for the support. And he actually felt bad that Cruiser got hit.
I've joked with Chief Spatzino that he needs to show up with some Bondo.
Bondo.
I don't think that's gonna do it.
Okay, is there
Well,
any,
cars can be fixed, people.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's great.
is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up for the good of the order here? Tom, are you complete for tonight?
I think I'm in a
If he's
daze,
not, we're-
yeah.
Would you put Mickey, can we bring Mickey up?
I think I'm done. I'm getting ready for you to gavel the meeting close so I can close this.
The hand.
Yes, Frank.
Just sitting here for the last 3.5 hours, are we having a separate meeting on anything out that was cut out of fire department funds? Or is that, I mean, I don't care, I'm talking about the ice machine, but I have $4,000 taken out of these tires for the engine. When is that would be brought up?
Tom, what's the
Prob-
plan?
Probably at the regular meeting next week, next Monday. Set aside some time to talk about that.
How much were the tires, Frank?
$4 grand.
I don't know how we get away with not putting tires on vehicles.
Did they
That's
just
one
not
reason-
make it in? They just weren't in the original?
There were cuts, there were items that were cut.
Okay.
Because again, we don't have the money to pay for everything,
Right.
so that's why I wanted to talk about the financing plans first.
Yeah, it seemed like in
because-
some of those scenarios you said, you also
Yeah, we
came
could
back
add
and
stuff
said we
back
can
in
add
if we
some
do
stuff
that.
back. And that's I think we should spend a little time on that when that time comes, if we decide what plan, yeah.
How did I miss the tires?
Sorry?
How did I miss the tires?
You didn't, they were.
You did, they were taken out, and I thought today, I can believe, but
So I guess the answer to that question is yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't
I
talk
just need
about
to
it.
know when I need to be back.
Next Monday.
Going to be on our business meeting.
Well, that'll be next Monday night, won't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm declaring the meeting adjourned.
Where's he, what are you talking about, tires? Yeah, try.